Do-hyun's signature was still wet on the document when he walked out of the hotel suite. The conference room had been silent, except for the scratch of his Mont Blanc pen across the settlement agreement. Another family paid off. Another death buried under a non-disclosure clause. Another construction site incident reduced to a line item in quarterly reports. Vice President Jin had smiled, patted his shoulder, murmured congratulations in formal Korean. The family had accepted half of what they'd initially demanded. Efficient. Clean. Do-hyun made it to the elevator before his hands started shaking. He left his phone on the nightstand, his wallet on the dresser, the hotel keycard on the bed. He walked past the security detail in the lobby, past the valet who called after him, past the glass tower that reflected a stranger in a wrinkled suit. His tie hung from his pocket like a surrender flag. His Italian leather shoes scraped against cracked pavement as he walked block after block through a city he'd lived in for 3 years, but never actually seen. At 3 a.m, his legs gave out on a commercial street corner where the only light came from a flickering street lamp and a bakery preparing for dawn. He sat on the curb, his expensive suit sticking to his back with sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature. His chest felt hollow. The signature, his signature, was on 47 pages. 47 pages to make a widow disappear. He thought about the pen still in his jacket pocket. How easy it was to sign. How little his hand had hesitated. Footsteps approached. Do-hyun didn't look up. A cloth bag appeared in his peripheral vision, held by hands that were calloused and certain. He lifted his head. The woman standing above him wore a cleaning company uniform under a worn jacket that had been mended at the elbows. Her skin was a rich golden brown, her hair pulled back in a practical bun that had loosened during a long shift. Her eyes were the deep brown of turned earth, and they assessed him with neither pity nor judgment, only recognition. "It's all I have today," she said, her voice carrying the faint exhaustion of someone who'd already worked 8 hours and would work 8 more. She opened the bag and separated 3 loaves of bread from the 6 inside, pressing them into his hands before he could refuse. "But get off this corner before someone kicks you." Do-hyun tried to refuse in English, fractured by exhaustion. "I cannot. I should not. I'm not asking for thanks." Her tone was firm, matter of fact. "I'm asking you to take care of yourself." She adjusted the bag on her shoulder, the remaining 3 loaves carefully protected. Do-hyun glimpsed the edge of a faded photograph tucked into the bag's outer pocket. A woman, a man, a laughing baby. The same woman who stood before him, younger, her smile unguarded. She turned to leave. "Wait." Do-hyun's voice cracked. In Korean, barely a whisper. "미안합니다." "I'm sorry." She paused, glanced back. "I don't speak Korean, but you're welcome." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading toward the pre-dawn darkness, leaving him on the sidewalk with warm bread in his hands and something cracking open in his chest. For the first time in years, someone had treated him like a person instead of a position. Someone had shared the last of what she had without asking his name, his title, his worth. Do-hyun sat there until the bread cooled in his hands, until the first hint of gray touched the sky, until he could breathe again without feeling like his lungs were full of broken glass. He didn't know yet that he was holding bread meant for a teenage boy's breakfast. He didn't know that the woman who'd saved him was a widow. And he had no idea that the husband in that faded photograph had died on a construction site because he had signed budget approval without reading the safety reports. Tomorrow, their worlds would collide in a meeting room with glass walls and filtered light. Tomorrow, neither of them would be ready for the truth. But tonight, Eleora Kane walked home 3 loaves lighter, her son's breakfast halved, her own stomach empty, believing she'd helped a stranger. And Ri Do-hyun sat on a sidewalk, holding the last act of genuine kindness he would receive before everything fell apart. If you've ever wondered whether one choice can change everything, whether sharing what you don't have can break the person you give it to, then you already know this story will hurt. And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what needs to happen. Subscribe and follow, because this is the kind of story that will make you question every signature, every silence, every time you chose comfort over truth. We need your support to keep writing stories that refuse to let you look away. Eliora arrived at the Hansong Tower at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes earlier than her official shift start time. She always came early. It was the only way to guarantee she could use the service entrance bathroom before the morning rush. The only way to ensure her cleaning cart was fully stocked. The only way to steal 3 minutes of silence before the fluorescent lights and chemical smell of industrial cleaner became her entire world. She clocked in with her temporary badge, the laminated card hanging from a lanyard that read, "Contracted staff," in letters larger than her name. The badge photo was 2 years old, taken 3 weeks after Daniel's funeral, and she hated looking at it. The woman in that picture had eyes like open wounds. Mrs. Park had sent an extra loaf this morning, wrapped in paper with a note in careful English. For Marcus. Growing boys need more. Elira had packed it in her son's lunch without telling him about last night. What would she say? "I gave half your breakfast to a stranger because he looked broken?" Marcus would have understood. He always understood. But understanding and accepting were different territories, and her son had already accepted too much. The 34th floor was executive territory, the domain of vice presidents and directors, of glass-walled conference rooms and coffee machines that cost more than her monthly rent. Eliora moved through it like a ghost, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces, existing in the space between night and morning, when powerful people were still asleep, and she could pretend the building belonged to workers like her. She entered conference room B at 6:15 a.m. The room still smelled like yesterday's meeting. Expensive cologne, leather portfolios, the faint metallic tang of tension. 12 chairs around an oval table, half with empty coffee cups, one with a forgotten legal pad covered in Korean characters she couldn't read. She collected the cups, wiped down the table, straightened the chairs. The sun was rising now, painting the glass walls amber and rose. Eliora paused for half a second, just half, to watch the city wake up below. From this height, cars looked like toys. People were invisible. The gap between the 34th floor and the street felt like the distance between planets. She pushed her cart toward the door. "Excuse me. Could you—" "Oh." Eliora turned. The man standing in the doorway wore a suit that probably cost 3 months of her salary. His black hair was immaculate, graying at the temples in a way that suggested distinguished competence. His face was composed, his posture perfect, the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime being watched, being obeyed, being untouchable. But his eyes. Eliora knew those eyes. Exhaustion, hollowness. The specific devastation of someone who'd hit bottom and was still trying to figure out how to stand. The beggar from the sidewalk. The broken man who'd accepted her bread with trembling hands. Only now he wore armor made of wool and silk, and 3 other men in similarly expensive suits flanked him like an honor guard, and one of them was saying "Hoijang-nim" in a tone of absolute deference. Hoijang-nim. Chairman. The man, the CEO, stared at her with the expression of someone watching a building collapse in slow motion. Recognition and horror moved across his face in equal measure. Eliora's hands tightened on the cleaning cart handle. Around them, the executives were filing into the conference room, settling into chairs, opening laptops. None of them looked at her. To them, she was furniture. Necessary, invisible, irrelevant. But the chairman, Do-hyun, she remembered now. His name had been on the directory. Couldn't look away. She should leave. She should push her cart out the door and finish her shift and forget she'd ever seen a powerful man reduced to nothing on a sidewalk. She should protect the fragile dignity of her anonymity. Instead, she met his gaze and let him see that she remembered. That she knew. That the bread he'd accepted had been meant for her son's breakfast. And she'd given it anyway, because even strangers deserved not to break alone. Then she pushed her cart through the door and let it close behind her. She made it to the service hallway before her hands started shaking. For 3 days, Eliora didn't see him again. She worked her shifts, cleaning offices before executives arrived, emptying trash bins full of discarded drafts and half-eaten lunches that cost more than her groceries, wiping fingerprints from glass walls that separated the powerful from everyone else. She baked bread with Mrs. Park in the pre-dawn hours, her hands moving through familiar rhythms while her mind circled the same question. What kind of person lives in two worlds so completely separate? On the fourth day, an envelope arrived at Mrs. Park's bakery. It was cream-colored, expensive, addressed to Eliora Kane, in printed letters. Inside was a formal invitation to attend an informational meeting for the Hanseong Foundation Humanitarian Reparation Program, a new initiative designed to provide support for families affected by workplace accidents involving company subsidiaries. Mrs. Park read the letter over Eliora's shoulder, her flour-dusted hands leaving prints on the counter. "They're trying to buy silence," the older woman said flatly. "This is what companies do when lawsuits get expensive." "It says, no legal obligations," Eliora replied, reading the fine print. "Voluntary participation, dignified support for affected families." Dignified. Mrs. Park's laugh was bitter. "They'll give you enough to feel grateful and not enough to matter. And you'll sign away your right to sue." "I don't have the money to sue. Dante's coalition is working on a class action. That could take years." Eliora folded the letter carefully, precisely. "And in the meantime, Marcus needs new shoes. I need to fix the heater before winter. This program, maybe it's something." Mrs. Park's expression softened into something sadder than anger. "You're a smart woman, Eliora. Smart enough to know when you're being used. And I'm tired enough not to care." The meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 4:00 p.m. in Conference Room A, the largest one, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and art that cost more than most people's houses. Eliora requested the afternoon off from her cleaning shift, took the service elevator up, and arrived at 3:57 p.m. wearing the only professional clothes she owned, a black skirt and white blouse that had been Daniel's funeral outfit, mended twice since then. 15 other people sat in the conference room. Mostly women, mostly brown and black faces, all of them wearing the specific expression of people who'd learned to expect nothing and hope anyway. A young woman in a crisp suit welcomed them in English heavily accented by Korean formality. She explained the program, financial assistance, job training opportunities, educational scholarships for dependents, mental health resources. Everything sounded generous. Everything sounded rehearsed. Eliora listened with half her attention, the other half cataloging details. The coffee service was real china. The chairs were leather. The woman presenting kept glancing toward the back of the room, as if waiting for a cue. "And now," the woman said, "I'd like to introduce the architect of this program, the person whose vision made it possible, Hansung Group Chairman Ri Do-hyun." The door opened. Do-hyun entered, flanked by 2 assistants. He wore a different suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, but the same exhaustion lived in his eyes. He moved to the front of the room with the controlled grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime performing authority. His gaze swept across the assembled families. It snagged on Eliora like a hook catching flesh. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Do-hyun's carefully composed expression fractured just slightly, a hairline crack in expensive porcelain, and Eliora understood with perfect, devastating clarity. He knew. He'd known before this meeting. He'd created this program, and he'd invited her specifically, and he thought, what? That she would accept his charity? That money could replace bread shared in genuine need? That a program with letterhead could erase the image of a broken man accepting help from a woman who had nothing? Eliora stood. Every head in the room turned toward her. "Thank you for the invitation," she said, her voice steady and clear. "But I don't accept charity from people who mistake guilt for generosity." She walked toward the door. "Mrs. Kane." Do-hyun's voice stopped her. He'd reverted to English, his accent thicker under stress. "Please, allow me to explain." "Explain what?" Eliora turned back. The other families watched with the fascinated horror of people witnessing a car crash. Explain that you created a program to make yourself feel better. Explain that you thought a nice office and some paperwork could replace the fact that on that sidewalk, you were just a person who needed help. Or should I let you explain how much you're willing to pay to make people like me disappear? That is not. Do-hyun took a step forward, then visibly restrained himself. In the rigid hierarchy of Korean business culture, losing composure in front of subordinates was a cardinal sin. But his control was slipping. This program is genuine. I want to provide real support. To families affected by your company's subsidiaries. Eliora's voice could have cut glass. To people whose loved ones died because someone prioritized deadlines over safety. Did you invite me because you wanted to help? Or because you wanted to prove to yourself that you're not the man I found on that sidewalk? The man who'd just signed away another family's right to justice? The room had gone silent. Do-hyun's face drained of color. You were running, Eliora continued, softer now but no less sharp. You were running from exactly this, from rooms full of people whose lives your decisions destroyed. And when I gave you bread, you took it because in that moment, you weren't a chairman. You were just someone who was broken. But now, you're back in your armor, and you think you can fix what you are by writing checks and creating programs with my name on the invitation list. She walked to the door, pulled it open. You can't buy your way back to being human, Mr. Rhee. You have to decide if you're willing to stop running. The door closed behind her with a soft final click. Eliora made it to the service elevator before her professional mask crumbled. She leaned against the metal wall, her breath coming in sharp gasps, her hands shaking with adrenaline and rage and the terrible weight of having said what she meant. The elevator descended. 34 floors, 33, 32, and with each floor, she felt the armor of her anger crack just slightly to reveal the exhaustion underneath. She'd burned a bridge. Maybe the only bridge that could have led to the support Marcus needed. But some bridges deserved to burn. Marcus Kane had learned to move through his mother's apartment like a ghost, carefully, quietly, taking up as little space as possible. It was a survival skill he'd developed over the past 2 years, ever since his father's death had transformed their home from a place of moderate chaos into a museum of careful scarcity. He knew which floorboards creaked. He knew how to open the refrigerator without the door making noise. He knew his mother's schedule down to the minute. Cleaning shift from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., 3-hour break at home, evening shift at the bakery from 5:30 p.m. to 9 p.m., home by 9:45 if the bus was on time. It was Thursday, 3:15 p.m. She should have been asleep in her room, catching rest before the bakery shift. Instead, Marcus came home from school to find her sitting at the kitchen table in her funeral clothes, staring at nothing, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Mom? She blinked, focused on him slowly. You're home early. Half day, teacher workshops. Marcus set his backpack down, assessing. Her eyes were red but dry, past crying, into the exhausted territory beyond tears. What happened? Nothing happened. Mom. She exhaled, a sound like air escaping from something punctured. I went to a meeting at the company, a program for families affected by workplace accidents. I thought. It doesn't matter what I thought. I left. Marcus moved to the sink, filled a glass with water, set it in front of her. She took it automatically, her hand still trembling slightly. Why'd you leave? Because the person running it was... She stopped. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. Marcus could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was waiting for the next blow. Something had happened that went beyond a disappointing meeting. He made the decision in the space of a heartbeat. I need to show you something. His room was barely large enough for a twin bed and a battered desk. Marcus knelt beside the bed, pulled out the cardboard box he'd shoved underneath. His father's toolbox, the one he'd carried to every job site, covered in stickers from different unions and companies and cities where Daniel Kane had helped build the bones of buildings he'd never see finished. Marcus opened it. The tools were still there, carefully maintained because he couldn't bear to let them rust. Underneath the top tray, wrapped in an old t-shirt, was the letter. He'd found it 3 months ago while looking for a screwdriver to fix the apartment's leaking sink. He'd read it alone in his room, his hands shaking so badly the paper rattled. And he'd hidden it again because he couldn't figure out what to do with it, with the truth that his father had known, had documented, had tried to speak up. Now he handed it to his mother. Dad wrote this 5 days before the accident. Eliora took the letter like it might burn her. Her eyes moved across the familiar handwriting. Daniel's careful, deliberate print. To whom it may concern. This is the 3rd time I'm documenting safety concerns on the Hanseong Riverside Development Site, Building C. The steel scaffolding on the east face, floors 1522, has not been properly anchored. The support cables are fraying. The safety inspector signed off on everything, but I've been doing this work for 18 years and I know what unstable looks like. I've reported this to my site supervisor, who told me to stay in my lane. I've reported it to the project manager, who said the schedule is non-negotiable. I'm reporting it now in writing because someone needs to know that when something goes wrong, and it will, it won't be because nobody tried to stop it. We're being pushed to work faster than safety allows. I have a wife and a son. I need this job, but I also need to sleep at night. If you're reading this and nothing has gone wrong yet, there's still time to fix it. If you're reading this because something did go wrong, then at least someone will know it didn't have to happen. Respectfully, Daniel Kane Union, card 4782. The letter was dated 5 days before the scaffolding collapse that killed Daniel and 2 other workers. Eliora read it twice, then a 3rd time. Her face had gone completely still, not frozen, but deliberately, carefully controlled. Where did you find this? Her voice was steady, too steady. In the bottom of the toolbox, under the tray. Why didn't you show me before? Marcus swallowed hard. Because it hurt. Because it meant he knew. And I thought maybe it was better if we didn't have proof that someone could have stopped it. Eliora set the letter on the table, smoothed it flat with hands that had stopped shaking. This is evidence. I know. This proves the company knew there were problems. That they ignored them. Yeah. The company... She stopped. Her eyes widened as pieces connected. Marcus, the company that owned that site, was a Hansong Group subsidiary. I looked it up. Marcus watched his mother's face, saw understanding and fury and grief collide. Mom, that meeting you went to today, the program, was it? Yes. The word came out flat. It was run by the Hanseong chairman, the man whose company killed your father. Marcus sat down heavily. Did he know? About the site? About Dad? I don't know what he knows. Eliora picked up the letter again, her fingers tracing her husband's handwriting. But he's about to find out. Dante Williams ran the Northside Community Coalition out of a converted storefront that smelled like coffee and old carpet. The space was crowded with mismatched furniture, a wall of filing cabinets that held decades of residents' complaints, and a core group of organizers who'd been fighting gentrification, labor exploitation, and corporate negligence long enough to recognize all 3 when they showed up wearing the same suit. Eliora arrived at 7:30 p.m. carrying the letter in a manila folder. Dante met her at the door. He was 35, shorter than Eliora, but built like he'd spent time doing physical labor before organizing became his full-time work. His dreadlocks were neat, his eyes sharp, his handshake firm. You look like you're ready to burn something down, he said. Close. Eliora handed him the folder. I need you to tell me what I can do with this. Dante read the letter standing up. His jaw tightened with each line. Jesus Christ, he muttered. When did your husband write this? 5 days before he died. My son found it in his toolbox 3 months ago. And you're showing me now because today I found out the chairman of Hansong Group created a humanitarian program to help families like mine. And I need to know if I'm crazy for thinking it's less about helping and more about covering his ass. Dante gestured to a battered couch. They sat, and he read the letter again. slower this time. This is gold, Eliora. This is documented proof that safety concerns were raised and ignored. This is exactly the kind of evidence we need for the class action lawsuit. How long would a lawsuit take? Years. Realistically, 3 to 5 before settlement. Longer if they appeal. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you survive. Same as you've been doing. Dante set the letter down carefully. But if we include this in the case, it strengthens everyone's position. It's not just your family. It's a pattern. It's proof that Hansung subsidiaries prioritized profit over safety across multiple sites. Eliora stared at her husband's handwriting. Dante, the chairman, Rai Do-hyun. I met him before I knew who he was. She told him about the sidewalk. The bread. The broken man who'd accepted help with trembling hands and apologized in a language she didn't speak. The shock of recognition in the conference room. The invitation to the program. The confrontation. Dante listened without interrupting, his expression moving from surprise to understanding to something like concern. So he saw you when he wasn't armored, Dante said slowly. And now he's trying to fix it. I don't know what he's trying to do. Eliora. Dante leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. You need to decide right now if you're going to be part of the lawsuit or if you're going to see if this program is legitimate. You can't do both. If you accept anything from Hansung, money, job training, whatever they're offering, it compromises your position as a plaintiff. So my choices are fight for years with no guarantee of winning, or accept help from the people who killed Daniel. Those are your choices, yes. Eliora closed her eyes. Behind her eyelids, she saw 2 images. Marcus's face when he'd handed her the letter, old grief and new anger mixing into something that looked like hope, that justice might still be possible. And Do-hyun's face on the sidewalk, devastation and exhaustion stripped of all corporate polish. Just a human being who'd reached the end of what he could carry alone. What if he didn't know? The question came out barely above a whisper. What if he signed papers without reading them because that's what chairmen do? They trust their people, they move fast, they keep the empire running. And he genuinely didn't know that people were dying? Does it matter? Dante's voice was kind but uncompromising. He was still responsible. He still benefited. The system still worked exactly the way it was designed to work, and your husband still died. But if he's trying to change, then he needs to prove it by opening everything. All the internal documents, all the safety reports, all the times his company chose deadlines over lives. He needs to expose the rot, not cover it with a program that makes him feel better. Eliora opened her eyes. What if I could make him do that? What? What if I could get him to open the documents, to expose everything, not just apologize or throw money at families to make them go away? Dante studied her with the expression of someone watching a friend walk toward a cliff edge. Eliora, you're talking about trying to reform a man who runs a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. A man who's been trained since childhood to protect the empire above everything else. A man whose entire identity is tied to maintaining power. I'm talking about a man who sat on a sidewalk at 3 a.m. holding bread he didn't think he deserved. Those are 2 different people. What if they're not? Eliora stood, took the letter back from Dante. What if he's both? What if the program is his way of trying to fix things from inside the system because he doesn't know how to tear the system down? What if someone needs to show him? And you think that someone is you? I think I'm the only person who's seen him without his armor. I think that matters. Dante stood too, his expression torn between respect and worry. If you do this, if you try to work with him instead of against him, you're gambling everything on the possibility that a CEO can choose conscience over empire. And if you're wrong, you'll end up as the face of their image-washing operation while the system keeps grinding up people just like your husband. And if I'm right, if you're right, you might actually change something. Dante pulled a card from his wallet, handed it to her. This is the lawyer running the class action. If you decide to join the lawsuit, call her. If you decide to try the other path, don't let them use you, Eliora. Don't let him use you. Make him earn every ounce of trust, And don't give him anything for free. Eliora took the card. He already got bread for free. Then everything after that comes with a price. Do-hyun didn't sleep Thursday night. He sat in his apartment, a penthouse that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, and stared at the city lights below while the ice melted in his untouched whiskey. His mind kept replaying the moment Eliora Kane had walked out of the conference room, her words hanging in the air like smoke from an explosion. You can't buy your way back to being human. At 2 a.m., he called his private lawyer. At 2:45 a.m., he had the files he'd requested, every document related to the Hansong Riverside development, every safety report, every budget approval, every communication chain from the site manager to the subsidiary director to corporate oversight. At 3:20 a.m., he found the letter from Daniel Kane. It had been filed in a folder marked Resolved, Employee Concerns Addressed, which meant someone had received it, logged it, and done absolutely nothing. The report attached to the letter was a single page from the site supervisor. Inspected scaffolding. All structures meet code requirements. Employee Kane is overcautious due to age, experience. No action needed. The scaffolding had collapsed 6 days later. Do-hyun read Daniel Kane's letter 3 times. The careful handwriting, the respectful tone, the man trying to do the right thing while keeping the job that fed his family. The man who documented his own death because he'd known, and no one had listened. At 3:47 a.m., Do-hyun found his own signature. Budget approval form, Hansong Riverside Development, Building C. Expedited schedule to meet investor deadline. Additional funding allocated for overtime pay and schedule bonuses. Safety review waived due to timeline constraints, deferred to site-level oversight. His signature was on every page. He'd signed it during a marathon approval session, 30 documents in 2 hours, Vice President Jin walking him through each one with efficient summaries, Do-hyun trusting that his people had done their due diligence. He hadn't read the full reports. He'd trusted the system. The system had killed 3 men. One of them had been Daniel Kane, husband of Eliora, father of a son whose name Do-hyun didn't even know. Do-hyun sat with the documents until dawn broke over the city, painting his white walls gold and pink. His phone buzzed with messages from his assistant about his 8 a.m. meeting. His coffee maker beeped to announce fresh coffee he hadn't remembered programming. The world continued its relentless forward motion, and Do-hyun sat frozen in the center of his expensive life, holding proof of his own complicity. At 7:15 a.m., he showered and dressed in his chairman armor. Charcoal suit, silk tie, Italian shoes that cost more than Daniel Kane's monthly salary had been. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a stranger, the man Eliora had called out, the man who thought programs and paperwork could replace actual accountability. At 8 a.m., he walked into a board meeting and performed the role of competent leadership. At 12:30 p.m., Vice President Jin cornered him in his office. "The Kane woman," Jin said without preamble, his Korean formal and clipped. "She's a problem. Mrs. Kane is a grieving widow who was invited to a program designed to help families like hers." Do-hyun kept his voice level with effort. "Mrs. Kane is a grieving widow who made you look weak in front of 15 potential plaintiffs." Jin set a tablet on the desk, pulled up a news article. Hanseong chairman faces criticism at humanitarian program launch. Widow calls initiative. Charity from guilt. Someone had leaked. Someone always leaked. "She's not wrong," Do-hyun said quietly. "Excuse me? She's not wrong. The program was designed to minimize legal exposure while appearing generous." Jin's expression hardened. "That's called smart business. That's called prioritizing reputation over responsibility." "Chairman." Jin's voice dropped into the careful tone of a mentor delivering hard truth. "You've been in this position for 3 years. You've done well. But you're allowing personal guilt to cloud business judgment. The Riverside incident was handled according to protocol. The families received compensation. The subsidiary implemented new safety measures. We moved forward. 3 men died, Jin Bujang. 3 men die in construction accidents every day. We can't save everyone. We could have saved Daniel Kane. Do-hyun opened the file on his desk, pulled out the letter. He wrote to us 5 days before the collapse. He documented safety concerns. Someone filed it under resolved without acting. Jin glanced at the letter, his face carefully neutral. Site-level miscommunication. The subsidiary has new protocols. My signature waived the safety review. Silence. Jin's expression shifted from patient to calculating. Chairman, you sign hundreds of documents per month. You can't be expected to read every line of every report. That's why we have site managers, project directors, subsidiary oversight. Then the system failed, and I'm responsible for the system. No. Jin leaned forward, his voice hardening. You're responsible for a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that employs 50,000 people. You're responsible for maintaining investor confidence and corporate stability. You're responsible for the empire your family built over 3 generations. You are not responsible for fixing every accident, helping every family, or processing guilt that will never change what happened. Do-hyun met his vice president's eyes. What if I want to be? Want to be what? Responsible. Actually responsible, not just signing papers and trusting the system. What if I want to know the truth about every site, every accident, every time we chose profit over safety? Jin straightened slowly. Chairman, if you pursue this path, you'll destroy your own company. You'll expose vulnerabilities that competitors and plaintiffs will exploit. You'll lose the confidence of the board, your investors, and your family. For what? To satisfy a widow who shared bread with you on a sidewalk? She shared her son's breakfast. The words came out harder than Do-hyun intended. She gave away food her son needed because I looked broken. That's not charity, Jin Bujang. That's the kind of human decency I've spent 3 years systematically destroying through paperwork and efficiency. Then you're a fool, Jin said flatly. And if you continue down this path, I'll have no choice but to recommend your removal to the board. He left without bowing, without the usual formality. A breach of etiquette that would have been shocking if Do-hyun had any capacity left to be shocked. Do-hyun sat alone in his office, Daniel Kane's letter on the desk, his own signature staring back at him like an accusation. At 4:30 p.m., he made a call. At 5:01 p.m., he left the building through the main entrance instead of the executive garage, walked 6 blocks to a bakery called Park's Daily Bread, and stepped inside. Mrs. Park saw him before Eliora did. The older woman was pulling a tray of sourdough from the oven when the door chimed, and she looked up to see a man in an expensive suit standing in her bakery, like he'd wandered in from another dimension. She recognized him immediately, not from personal acquaintance, but from the particular way he held himself, the posture of someone who was used to being the most important person in any room, and was now deeply uncomfortable not being. We're closing soon, Mrs. Park said in Korean, testing. Do-hyun switched to English. I'm looking for Eliora Kane. Why? I need to speak with her. It's important. Mrs. Park set the bread on the cooling rack, studied him with the frank assessment of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize bullshit on sight. You're the chairman. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. She doesn't want to talk to you. I know, but I need to talk to her anyway. Men who need things are usually the most dangerous. Mrs. Park wiped flour from her hands. What makes you think you have the right to show up at her workplace? I don't have the right. Do-hyun's shoulders dropped slightly. But I have information she deserves to know. Eliora emerged from the back room carrying a bag of flour and froze when she saw him. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Mrs. Park said quietly in English, Eliora, ya. You want me to make him leave? No. Eliora set the flour down carefully. I'll talk to him. Outside. They stood on the sidewalk in the late afternoon light, close enough to the bakery that Mrs. Park could watch through the window, but far enough that their conversation was private. Eliora crossed her arms, a defensive posture that made her look simultaneously vulnerable and untouchable. You shouldn't have come here, she said. I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing and tell me what you want. Do-hyun pulled a folder from his briefcase. I want you to have this. Eliora didn't take it. What is it? Documents from the Riverside development, safety reports, budget approvals, communication chains, and your husband's letter to the company documenting his concerns 5 days before the collapse. Eliora's breath caught. You have his letter? The company had it. Someone filed it without acting on it. Do-hyun's voice was steady but strained. And I signed the budget approval that waived the safety review because the construction schedule was behind. My signature is on every page, Mrs. Kane. I approve the conditions that killed your husband. Eliora took the folder with hands that trembled slightly. She opened it, saw Daniel's familiar handwriting, and something inside her chest fractured and reformed simultaneously. Why are you giving me this? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because you were right. I can't buy my way back to being human, but I can stop lying. Do-hyun looked at her with an expression of such raw exhaustion that Eliora felt an unwelcome flicker of recognition. The same expression he'd worn on the sidewalk, the same man beneath the armor. I can give you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. The truth. Eliora's laugh was sharp, bitter. The truth is that you signed papers without reading them, and my husband died. The truth is that your system worked exactly as designed. Fast, efficient, profitable, and the cost was 3 men's lives. What am I supposed to do with that, Mr. Rhee? Forgive you? Thank you for your honesty? No. I'm asking you to destroy me with it. Eliora stared at him. Take these documents, Do-hyun continued. Give them to the lawyer running the class action lawsuit. Use them to expose every failure, every shortcut, every time Han-seong chose profit over safety. Use them to take apart the system that killed your husband. Why would you do that? Because I sat on a sidewalk at 3 a.m. holding bread that should have fed your son. And for the first time in years, I felt like a human being instead of a position. Because you saw me without my armor, and you gave me something anyway. Because your husband wrote a letter trying to save lives and someone buried it in a file marked resolved. His voice cracked slightly. Because I can't undo what I did, but I can stop pretending it didn't happen. Eliora held the folder against her chest, her mind racing. If I use these documents, your company will face the consequences it should have faced 3 years ago. I'll resign. I'll accept legal liability. The board will elect Jin as chairman, and he'll fight you every step. But at least the truth will be public. And then what? You ride off into the sunset feeling noble while the system keeps grinding? No. Do-hyun met her eyes. Then I figure out how to be the person you saw on that sidewalk. Someone who can accept help. Someone who can be broken and honest instead of armored and efficient. I don't know how to do that yet. But I know I can't keep being what I am. Eliora wanted to hate him. It would be so much easier if she could hate him. If he were purely a villain, purely the architect of her suffering, purely the embodiment of corporate evil. But the man standing in front of her was wearing a suit that cost more than her rent, and looking at her with the eyes of someone who'd already decided to jump off a cliff and was just waiting for gravity to take hold. I need time, she said finally. I need to think about what to do with this. Take all the time you need. And I need you to stay away from me while I do. Do-hyun nodded, started to turn away. Wait. Eliora's voice stopped him. On the sidewalk, when you took the bread, you said something in Korean. 미안합니다. 미안합니다. I'm sorry. Why were you apologizing? Because I knew, not consciously but somewhere deeper, that I didn't deserve kindness. That I'd done things that made me unworthy of what you were offering. He looked at her with something like hope mixed with resignation. I was apologizing for being the person you'd eventually discover I am. And now I know. And now you know. Do-hyun bowed slightly. a Korean gesture of respect that looked out of place on an American sidewalk, but felt absolutely sincere. "Whatever you decide, Mrs. Kane, I'm grateful you let me tell you the truth." He walked away into the early evening, his expensive suit blending into the crowd, and Eliora stood outside the bakery holding a folder full of evidence that could destroy an empire or change absolutely nothing, depending on what she chose to do with it. Mrs. Park appeared at her elbow. "Well? I don't know," Eliora whispered. "I honestly don't know." That night, at 11:47 p.m., Eliora's phone rang. She almost didn't answer. She'd been lying in bed staring at the ceiling, the folder of documents on her nightstand like a bomb waiting to detonate. Marcus was asleep in his room. The apartment was quiet except for the ambient noise of the city through thin walls. The number was unknown. She answered. "Mrs. Kane." Do-hyun's voice was rough, like he'd been crying or hadn't slept or both. "I need to tell you something that will make you hate me." "I'm listening." "I lied earlier. Not about the documents, those are real, but about not knowing. I knew there were safety issues at subsidiary sites, not specifically at Riverside, but in general. Jin brought it up in quarterly reviews. I approved a policy of deferring to site-level judgment to avoid corporate liability. I made a conscious choice to trust the system because fixing the system would have required slowing down, spending more, prioritizing workers over investors. His breath shuddered. "I didn't kill your husband by accident, Mrs. Kane. I killed him through deliberate negligence dressed up as efficient management. And I need you to know that before you decide what to do." Eliora closed her eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you asked me on that sidewalk to take care of myself, and I can't do that while lying. Taking care of yourself means destroying your career. My career is built on a foundation of dead workers. Maybe it should be destroyed." Do-hyun. His first name slipped out before she could stop it. "If you do this, if you actually expose everything, you'll lose more than your career. You'll lose your family, your reputation, your entire identity. Are you really ready for that?" "I don't know. But I know I can't keep being this person." A long pause. "You gave me bread when I had nothing to offer in return. You saw me as human when I'd forgotten how to be one. I don't expect forgiveness, Mrs. Kane. I don't expect anything. I just need you to know the truth, all of it, before you make your choice. And if I choose to use these documents to destroy you, then I'll deserve it. And if I choose something else, I don't know what else there is." "Neither do I," Eliora whispered. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe we're both standing on a sidewalk at midnight trying to figure out how to be human." She hung up before he could respond, her heart pounding, her mind full of her husband's letter and Do-hyun's signature, and the terrible, complicated reality that sometimes the people who hurt you most are also just people. Broken, trying, failing in ways that destroy lives, including their own. In his penthouse across the city, Do-hyun sat with his phone in his hand and wondered if honesty was the same as redemption, or if some sins were too large to ever be forgiven. Neither of them slept that night. And miles away, in a corporate office that never truly closed, Vice President Jin reviewed the security footage of his chairman visiting a bakery and made a phone call of his own. The article hit the morning news cycle like a grenade. Hanseong chairman uses widow as image shield in scandal cover-up. Below the headline was a photo that made Eliora's stomach drop. Herself and Do-hyun standing on the bakery sidewalk, him handing her the folder, her holding it against her chest. The image had been taken from across the street with a long lens, the composition carefully framed to make it look like she was accepting payment, like they were co-conspirators rather than two people trying to navigate an impossible situation. The article was worse than the photo. Sources close to Hansung Group reveal that Chairman Ri Do-hyun personally recruited Eliora Kane, widow of construction worker Daniel Kane, who died in a 2022 Hansung subsidiary site collapse, to serve as the face of the company's new humanitarian program. Mrs. Kane, who works as a contracted cleaner in Hansung's headquarters building, was allegedly offered financial incentives and job advancement in exchange for public statements supporting the company's reformed safety policies. "It's classic image washing," said labor rights attorney Monica Herrera. "The company finds a sympathetic victim, offers them just enough support to look generous, and uses their story to deflect from systemic problems." Mrs. Kane could not be reached for comment. Chairman Rhee's office issued a statement calling the allegations false and defamatory, but declined to provide details about the nature of his relationship with Mrs. Kane or the contents of their private meeting. This latest controversy comes amid growing pressure on Hanseong Group to address workplace safety practices across its subsidiary network, where at least 12 workers have died in the past 3 years. Eliora read the article on her phone while sitting at the kitchen table, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Marcus stood behind her, reading over her shoulder, his face frozen in an expression between fury and grief. "Mom," he said quietly. "Mom, they're saying you sold out." "I know what they're saying." "Did you accept anything from him?" "No." Eliora set the phone down. "He gave me documents, evidence about your father's death. He wanted me to use them against the company." "Then why does it look like—" "Because someone wants it to look like I'm being bought." Eliora stood, paced to the window, looked out at the street below. "Someone leaked this. Someone took that photo and wrote that story to make sure I'm destroyed before I can do anything with what Do-hyun gave me." Her phone buzzed. Text from Dante. "Call me. Now." She called. "Eliora, what the hell?" Dante's voice was tight with controlled anger. "I didn't accept anything from them. He gave me evidence. I don't care what he gave you. Do you understand what this looks like? To everyone in the community, to everyone we've been organizing, you look like you took money from the company that killed your husband. You look like exactly what they're saying you are, a prop in their image campaign. I'm not. It doesn't matter what you are. It matters what it looks like." Dante exhaled hard. Reporters have been calling the coalition office since 6 a.m. They want a statement. They want to know if you're part of the lawsuit or if you've been compromised. What am I supposed to tell them? Eliora's mind raced. Tell them I haven't accepted anything from Hanseong. Tell them I'm reviewing evidence about my husband's death, and I'll make a statement when I'm ready. That's not going to be enough. It's going to have to be. She hung up, leaned against the kitchen counter, tried to breathe through the sensation of the world collapsing around her. Her phone kept buzzing. Unknown numbers, reporters probably, people who wanted her statement or her confession or her blood. Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression hardening into something that looked too old for 16. "Mom, are you being stupid about this? Excuse me? Are you falling for him? Is that what this is?" The question hit like a physical blow. "Marcus, because Dad has been dead for 3 years, and I get that you're lonely. I get that you're tired. But this guy?" Marcus's voice cracked. "This guy's company killed Dad. And you're taking secret meetings with him, letting him give you stuff, looking at him like—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Like maybe he's not so bad. It's not that simple." "It is that simple. He signed the papers that let Dad die. That's simple. That's the only thing that matters. Marcus, listen to me." "No." Marcus grabbed his backpack. "I listened to you say we had to survive. I listened to you say we had to be practical. I listened to you take extra shifts and skip meals and pretend everything was fine. But I'm not listening to you defend the guy who destroyed our family." He walked out, the door slamming behind him hard enough to rattle the walls. Eliora stood alone in her kitchen, the morning sun streaming through cheap curtains, the article still glowing on her phone screen, and felt the full weight of what she'd lost and what she stood to lose pressing down like a physical force. Her phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number she answered without thinking. "Mrs. Kane, this is Christine Park from Channel 7 News. I'm doing a story on the Hanseong scandal and I'd love to get your perspective." Eliora hung up. Another call. Another reporter. She turned her phone off. At 9:15 a.m., there was a knock on her door. Eliora looked through the peephole and saw Mrs. Park standing in the hallway holding a paper bag. She opened the door. Mrs. Park stepped inside, set the bag on the table, fresh bread, still warm, and looked at Eliora with an expression of such profound understanding that Eliora's careful composure finally cracked. "I didn't take anything from them," Eliora whispered. "I didn't sell out." "I know." "Then why does everyone think I did?" Mrs. Park guided her to the couch, sat beside her, took her hands. "Because powerful people are very good at making truth look like lies, and lies look like truth. Because someone at that company saw you as a threat and decided to neutralize you before you could act. Do-hyun gave me evidence. Real evidence about Daniel's death, about the company ignoring safety concerns. He told me to use it to destroy them. And you believed him." Eliora stopped. "I don't know. Maybe. He called me last night and confessed that he'd made deliberate choices that led to deaths like Daniel's. He sounded broken, Mrs. Park. He sounded like a man who just realized what he'd become." Mrs. Park was quiet for a long moment. "Then, 40 years ago, I lost a son in a factory accident. He was 23. He'd reported unsafe conditions to his supervisor 3 times. His supervisor told him to keep his head down and do his job. 2 weeks later, a machine that should have had safety guards crushed his arm so badly they couldn't save him. He bled out before the ambulance arrived." Eliora stared at her. "Mrs. Park, I didn't know. I never told you. I never told anyone at the bakery." The older woman's eyes were bright, but her voice was steady. "The company offered me money. Not much, but enough to bury him and pay my rent for 6 months. They had me sign papers saying I wouldn't sue. I signed because I needed to eat, because I was alone, because I thought taking the money was the practical thing to do. What happened? The factory kept operating with the same unsafe conditions. 2 years later, another worker lost his hand. 5 years later, someone died the same way my son did." Mrs. Park's grip on Eliora's hands tightened. "I took the money, and nothing changed. I've lived with that for 40 years. You were surviving. You didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. I chose survival over justice. I chose silence over truth. And maybe that was the only choice I could have made. Maybe I wouldn't have survived otherwise. But I still have to live with knowing that my silence let it happen again." Eliora felt tears sliding down her face. "I don't want to be bought. But I also don't want Marcus to starve while I fight a battle that might take years and might not even win. Then don't fight their battle. Fight yours." Mrs. Park released her hands, stood. "This chairman, Do-hyun, he gave you evidence. He told you to destroy him. That's unusual. That's not how men like him operate. So either he's playing a very sophisticated game, or something in him actually broke. How do I know which? You test him. You make him prove it. You demand more than words, more than documents, more than private confessions." Mrs. Park moved to the door, paused. "And if he passes the test, if he actually chooses truth over empire, then maybe you're not being stupid. Maybe you're seeing something real." After she left, Eliora sat alone with the folder of documents, Daniel's letter, and a decision that felt impossible. Her phone, still turned off, sat silent on the table. Outside, reporters were probably camped near the building entrance, waiting for a statement, a photo, a sign that the story could continue to burn. And somewhere across the city, Do-hyun was likely dealing with his own fire. Do-hyun arrived at Hansung headquarters at 7:30 a.m. to find Vice President Jin already in his office. The older man sat in Do-hyun's chair, a breach of etiquette so severe it bordered on declaration of war, reading something on his tablet with the expression of a chess player who'd just achieved checkmate. "Jin Bujang." Do-hyun's voice was cold. "You're in my seat. I'm preparing to occupy it permanently." Jin didn't look up. "The board is convening an emergency session this afternoon to discuss your leadership. I expect they'll ask for your resignation by close of business. Based on what? Based on this. Jin turned the tablet around. The article, the photo, the quotes from unnamed sources painting Eliora as a paid conspirator, and Do-hyun as either a fool or a manipulator. You met privately with a widow whose husband died at our subsidiary site. You gave her confidential company documents. You compromised your position and the company's legal strategy to satisfy some personal crisis of conscience. I gave her the truth about how her husband died. You gave her ammunition for a lawsuit that could cost us hundreds of millions. Jin stood, moved around the desk with predatory patience. And in doing so, you violated your fiduciary duty to the shareholders. You exposed the company to liability, and you demonstrated that you're unfit to lead. I demonstrated that I'm unwilling to continue covering up negligent practices that kill workers. You demonstrated weakness. Jin's voice dropped into something colder. Hoajang-nim, I've known you since you were 30 years old. I helped train you. I helped position you for this role. And I've watched you become increasingly unstable over the past 6 months. The insomnia, the drinking, the walking out of meetings. Now this obsession with a cleaning woman who gave you bread. Mrs. Kane isn't an obsession. She's a mirror. A mirror showing you what exactly? What I've become. What the system I run actually does to real people. Do-hyun moved to the window, looked down at the city waking below. Jinbujang, how many workers have died at Hanseong sites in the past 5 years? I don't have that number readily available. 19. I looked it up. 19 confirmed deaths, dozens more injuries serious enough to end careers. And we settled every case with NDAs and payments calibrated to be large enough to look generous, but small enough not to impact quarterly earnings. That's standard practice across the industry. That's murder by spreadsheet. Do-hyun turned back. And I participated. I signed the approvals. I trusted you and the other directors to handle site-level issues. I made myself ignorant so I could maintain deniability. But I'm done being ignorant. Jin studied him with something like pity. You think confession makes you noble? You think destroying your career and the company's reputation somehow balances the scales? Hoajang-nim, those workers are still dead. Your guilt changes nothing except who controls this company. Then let it change that. If me losing control means the next chairman actually reads safety reports instead of signing blindly, the next chairman will be me. And I'll run this company exactly as it should be run. Efficiently, profitably, and without the sentimentality that's currently destroying your judgment. Jin collected his tablet. The board meets at 2 p.m. I suggest you prepare a resignation statement. If you resign voluntarily, we can control the narrative. If the board removes you, it becomes a public scandal that damages everyone, including Mrs. Kane. Mrs. Kane chose her path when she walked out of that program meeting. She chose drama over discretion. Now she's learning that choices have consequences. Jin moved to the door. As are you. After he left, Do-hyun stood in his office, for perhaps only a few more hours, and felt the walls closing in. The article had been a strategic strike, perfectly timed and executed. Jin had orchestrated it, probably had someone follow Do-hyun to the bakery, definitely had fed the story to a reporter who would frame it exactly as needed. Eliora was being destroyed to neutralize her as a threat, and Do-hyun's own destruction was collateral damage in a larger game of corporate survival. His phone buzzed. Text from his mother in Seoul. He could tell from the formal Korean and the timestamp, late evening there, that she'd already heard. Your behavior brings shame to our family. I expect you to resolve this immediately and appropriately. Do not force me to intervene. Do-hyun didn't respond. Another text, this one from his private lawyer. The board will ask for your resignation. If you fight it, they'll claim mental instability and force a vote. If you resign, you maintain some dignity and control over the narrative. Your call. Do-hyun looked at the city below, at the buildings his company had helped construct, at the workers moving like ants through streets where one of them, Daniel Kane, had once walked to sites where he'd tried to report problems no one wanted to hear about. He made his decision. At 9:45 a.m., Do-hyun called a press conference. His PR team tried to stop him. His lawyer tried to stop him. Jin stormed back into his office and physically reached for the phone, and Do-hyun moved it out of reach with a calmness that felt like free fall. "I'm doing this," Do-hyun said. "You'll destroy everything." "Good." The press conference was scheduled for 11 a.m. in the main lobby. By 10:30, reporters had gathered. Not just local business press, but national outlets, labor advocates, even a TV crew from Seoul covering the story for Korean expat audiences. Eliora watched it on her phone from her apartment, Mrs. Park sitting beside her, Marcus standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and his expression closed. Do-hyun stepped to the podium at 11:03 a.m. wearing his chairman armor, but carrying himself like someone who'd already shed it internally. "Good morning. I'm Ri Do-hyun, chairman of Hansong Group. I'm here to address recent articles about my relationship with Mrs. Eliora Kane and to provide clarity about Hansong's workplace safety practices." He paused, looked directly at the cameras. Mrs. Kane is the widow of Daniel Kane, a construction worker who died in 2022 when scaffolding collapsed at a Hansong subsidiary site. 5 days before that collapse, Mr. Kane submitted a written letter documenting safety concerns about that scaffolding. His letter was filed and ignored. The site supervisor dismissed his concerns. The project continued on an expedited schedule. And 3 men died because we prioritized deadlines over lives. Murmurs rippled through the assembled reporters. Jin, watching from the side of the lobby, had gone pale. I met Mrs. Kane under unusual circumstances. And yes, I gave her access to internal documents about her husband's death. I gave her those documents because she deserves to know the truth, that Hanseong's system of deferred responsibility and site-level oversight created conditions where workers' safety concerns could be ignored with impunity. A reporter shouted a question. Do-hyun ignored it. The article suggesting Mrs. Kane accepted payment or position in exchange for supporting company reform is false. Mrs. Kane has accepted nothing from Hanseong. She walked out of our humanitarian program because she recognized it for what it was, an attempt to manage reputation rather than address root causes. She was right to walk out, and she was right to challenge me when I thought creating programs could replace actual accountability. His voice steadied, hardened. I'm announcing today that I'm authorizing an independent investigation into workplace safety practices across all Hanseong subsidiaries for the past 10 years. All internal documents, safety reports, and incident records will be made available to investigators. The findings will be made public regardless of legal or financial consequences. Additionally, I'm establishing a fund, separate from company resources, drawn from my personal assets, to provide direct support to families of workers killed or injured at Hansong sites, with no NDAs or legal waivers required. The lobby exploded with shouted questions. Furthermore, Do-hyun continued, his voice cutting through the noise, I'm resigning as chairman effective immediately. The board will elect new leadership, and that leadership will determine how to implement the investigation's findings. But I will not continue to lead a company whose practices I can no longer defend. He stepped back from the podium. Jin was already moving, trying to intercept him, but Do-hyun walked past him, past the reporters, out through the main entrance into the morning air. His phone exploded with calls and messages. His security detail followed at a discreet distance. Cameras tracked him as he walked down the street, his suit immaculate, but his posture that of someone who'd just set fire to everything and was watching it burn with something like relief. In Eliora's apartment, the 3 of them stared at the phone screen in silence. He actually did it, Mrs. Park whispered. He actually chose truth over empire. Marcus's expression hadn't changed. Or he's playing a longer game. Rich guys don't just give up power. Maybe this one does, Eliora said quietly, watching Do-hyun disappear from the camera's view. Maybe he finally broke all the way through. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Mrs. Kane. Do-hyun's voice sounded raw, stripped, I'm sorry. For the article, for the photo, for everything Jin did to try to neutralize you as a threat. I didn't authorize it, but it happened because of me. Because I gave you those documents and someone saw it. I watched your press conference. Then you know I meant what I said. About the investigation, about the fund, about everything. I can't undo what I did, but I can stop lying about it. Eliora closed her eyes. Do-hyun, you just destroyed your entire life. I destroyed a life built on other people's deaths. Maybe that needed to happen. And now what? You think this makes us even? You think blowing up your career somehow balances what happened to Daniel? No. Nothing balances that. But at least now the truth is public. At least now other families will know their loved ones tried to warn someone. At least now you have the resources and evidence to pursue real justice instead of settling for corporate charity. I don't want your money. It's not my money. It's compensation I should have paid 3 years ago instead of offering silence agreements. Take it. Use it. Build something that matters. Or don't. Burn it all and salt the earth. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. Eliora felt tears on her face. Why? Why are you doing this? Because you shared bread with a stranger when you didn't have enough for yourself. Because you saw me as human when I'd forgotten how to be one. Because I've spent 3 years signing papers and trusting systems and telling myself I was doing good by running an empire efficiently. And then I met you. And I couldn't lie anymore. Silence stretched between them. Do-hyun. Eliora's voice was softer than she intended. Thank you. For the truth. For the investigation. For actually meaning what you said. Will you... He stopped. Will you let me know what you decide? About the lawsuit? About the fund? About everything? Maybe. Eventually. That's more than I deserve. After she hung up, Marcus spoke from the doorway. Mom, are you falling for him? Eliora looked at her son, 16 years old, carrying grief and premature adulthood like a weight he'd been born to bear, and answered honestly, I don't know. Maybe. But not because he's rich or powerful, because he chose to break himself open, rather than keep pretending he wasn't complicit. That's not love, Marcus. That's respect for someone who chose the hard path when the easy one was right there. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, Dad would have wanted justice. I know. But he also would have wanted you to be happy. I know that too. Then maybe... Marcus's voice cracked slightly. Maybe you figure out which one matters more. Or if they can both be true. He disappeared into his room, leaving Eliora with the question that had no easy answer. The independent investigation took 3 months. Eliora didn't see Do-hyun during that time, but she felt his presence like a ghost in every news article, every update, every revelation that emerged from the investigation's work. The investigators, a team of former OSHA officials and labor attorneys, tore through Hanseong's subsidiary records like surgeons through diseased tissue, and what they found was worse than anyone had anticipated. 19 deaths over 5 years, 47 serious injuries, 83 documented safety complaints filed and ignored, a pattern of expedited schedules that compressed construction timelines to dangerous lengths, a culture of site supervisors dismissing concerns to avoid delays. A corporate oversight structure designed specifically to insulate top leadership from direct knowledge, and therefore direct liability. Daniel Kane's letter became Exhibit A in a case study of institutional negligence. The investigation's preliminary report leaked to the press in pieces, each revelation sparking new outrage. Hansong's stock price dropped 18%. 3 subsidiary directors resigned. Jin, now chairman, issued statements calling the investigation biased and agenda-driven, but the evidence was too thorough, too carefully documented, too damning. The families of other victims began coming forward. Dante's coalition lawsuit gained 73 new plaintiffs. The conversation shifted from workplace accidents to corporate manslaughter. And Eliora stood at the center of it all, neither fully inside nor outside, watching a man dismantle his own empire because she'd shared bread with him on a sidewalk. Do-hyun himself had disappeared from public view. He'd resigned from the board entirely, not just from the chairman position. He'd moved out of his penthouse. His whereabouts were unknown, though rumors placed him everywhere from Seoul to a monastery to a construction site where he was allegedly working as a laborer under a false name. Eliora knew better than to believe the rumors, but she also couldn't stop thinking about him. In December, the full investigation report was released publicly. It ran to 347 pages. Eliora received a copy delivered by courier, along with a handwritten note on expensive stationery that probably came from Do-hyun's old life. Mrs. Kane. This report contains the complete truth about your husband's death and 18 other deaths that could have been prevented. I hope it provides some measure of closure, or at least clarity. The fund I established has been fully funded and is being administered by an independent board. You're welcome to apply for support through formal channels, or to refuse it entirely. The choice is yours. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that the bread you shared saved something in me, even if it couldn't save what I'd already destroyed. Respectfully, Do-hyun. No last name. No title. Just a man who'd finally learned to sign his humanity instead of his authority. Eliora read the note 3 times, then tucked it into the folder alongside Daniel's letter. 2 pieces of paper that marked before and after, system and breaking. That night, she made a decision. She called Dante. I want to apply for the fund, not for me, for the coalition, to support the families pursuing the lawsuit. Eliora, if you accept money from that fund, even indirectly, it's not Hansong's money, it's his personal money, administered independently with no legal strings. And it can help families who need support while waiting for the lawsuit to resolve. We use his guilt to fund our justice. That feels right. Dante was quiet then. You're playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. I'm trying to turn pain into something useful. She called the fund administrator the next day and set up distributions for 12 families who joined the lawsuit. She didn't take anything for herself. She didn't want the money, didn't want the complication, didn't want to blur the lines more than they'd already blurred. But she also couldn't ignore that Do-hyun had actually followed through. That he'd broken himself to make room for truth. That he'd chosen the harder path every single time, even when easier options existed. In January, Eliora received a letter from Do-hyun's mother in Seoul. It was written in Korean with an English translation attached, formal and cold. Mrs. Kane, my son has disgraced our family name and destroyed a company built over 3 generations. I understand you were instrumental in his decisions. I'm writing to ask, as one mother to another, that you release him from whatever hold you have over him, so he can begin to repair the damage he's caused. If you require compensation for your silence, I'm prepared to negotiate terms. Respectfully, Mrs. Ri Sun-hee. Eliora stared at the letter for a long time. Then she wrote back, her English blunt and clear. Mrs. Ri, I have no hold over your son. I gave him bread when he was broken. He gave me truth when I was drowning in lies. The rest, the investigation, the resignations, the fund, those were his choices. If you want someone to blame for his disgrace, blame the system that taught him position mattered more than people. Your son didn't destroy a company. He exposed what it already was. I don't want your money. I want the workers your family's companies killed to be remembered as human beings, not line items. Eliora Kane. She never received a response. In February, on what would have been Daniel's 42nd birthday, Eliora took Marcus to the cemetery. They stood by the simple headstone, all they'd been able to afford 3 years ago, and Eliora told her son about the investigation, about the fund, about the choice she was facing. The lawsuit is moving forward, she said. Dante thinks we'll get a settlement within a year, maybe 2. It won't bring Dad back, but it might change how these companies operate. Marcus touched the headstone, his fingers tracing his father's name. Do you think Dad would be proud of you? I think he'd be angry it took so long. And I think he'd tell me to do whatever keeps you safe and fed. What about what keeps you human? Elira looked at her son. 17 now, taller than her, carrying his father's eyes and her stubbornness. What do you mean? Mom, you've spent 3 years surviving, working double shifts, skipping meals, shrinking yourself to fit into the space grief left behind. And then this guy, this chairman who should have been just another villain, he breaks open and suddenly you're not just surviving anymore. You're fighting, you're demanding truth, you're building something. Marcus, I'm not saying you should forgive him. I'm not even saying you should like him. But I see the way you read his note sometimes when you think I'm not watching. I see how you keep Dad's letter and his note in the same folder. And I think maybe you're trying to figure out if someone who helped kill Dad can also be someone who helps you remember how to be more than grief. Eleora's eyes burned. Your father. Dad's dead, Mom. Marcus's voice cracked. And that's the worst thing in the world, and I miss him every day, and I'll never stop being angry about how he died. But he's dead. You're not. And I don't want you to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for surviving. They stood in silence, the winter wind cold around them, the city noise distant, the moment crystallizing into something Eleora would remember forever. Her son giving her permission to be more than a widow. I don't know if I'm falling for him, Eleora said finally. But I know I respect what he did. I know he chose truth over comfort. And I know that's rare enough to matter. Then maybe stop avoiding him. Maybe figure out if that respect can become something else. Or at least give him a chance to prove he's more than the guy who signed Dad's death warrant. That night, Eleora did something she hadn't done in 3 months. She called Do-hyun. The number she had was disconnected. She tried his corporate email, bounced back. She stood in her apartment, phone in hand, frustrated and oddly bereft, when a knock came at her door. Eleora opened it to find Mrs. Park holding an envelope. A man came to the bakery, the older woman said. He asked me to give you this. He didn't leave a name, but I recognized him from the news. The envelope contained a single piece of paper, with an address written in careful English and a note. I'm not asking you to come. I'm not asking for anything. But if you want to see what I'm building with what's left of my life, this is where I am. DH. The address was in the North Side neighborhood, not far from Dante's coalition office. Eleora stared at it, her heart pounding with something between anticipation and terror. What are you going to do? Mrs. Park asked gently. I'm going to find out if the man who broke himself can build something new. Or if he's just broken. The address led to a building that had once been a warehouse. Red brick, high ceilings, enormous windows that let in winter light. The ground floor had been converted into a community space. Industrial kitchen on one side, rows of tables and chairs in the center, bulletin boards covered with flyers for job training programs, ESL classes, tenant rights workshops. A sign above the entrance read, North Side Workers Resource Center. Eleora pushed the door open and stepped into warmth and noise. 30 or 40 people filled the space. Families eating a meal together, workers clustered around laptops filling out applications, volunteers manning the kitchen. The air smelled like rice and beans and fresh bread. And standing at the stove, wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of a suit, his hair longer and less perfectly styled, his hands busy ladling soup into bowls, was Do-hyun. He didn't see her at first. He was focused on the work, moving with the careful competence of someone who'd learned this task recently and was determined to do it correctly. A small child, maybe 5 years old, tugged on his sleeve, and Do-hyun bent down, listened seriously to whatever question she asked, then nodded and helped her carry a bowl to her mother's table. Eleora watched from the doorway, something in her chest loosening and tightening simultaneously. Then Do-hyun looked up and saw her. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then he set down the ladle, wiped his hands on a towel, and walked over. Mrs. Kane. Mr. Rhee. They stood awkwardly in the doorway, 2 people who'd blown up each other's worlds trying to figure out what came next. You built this, Eleora said finally, gesturing to the space. I funded it. The coalition built it. I'm just helping where I can. Helping by Serving soup? Helping by doing something useful. Do-hyun's smile was tired but genuine. I was very good at signing papers and trusting systems. I'm learning to be adequate at cooking rice and washing dishes. It's humbling. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. I couldn't keep being what I was. And I couldn't just disappear into guilty solitude. So I asked Dante if there was something practical I could do. Something that actually helped instead of just making me feel better about myself. This was his answer. Eliora looked around the space again, at the families eating, at the workers finding resources, at the small acts of care and support happening in a building purchased with money from a dismantled empire. Dante let you help? I'm surprised he trusted you. He doesn't trust me. He supervises me. I report to him weekly about how the center's funds are being used. I'm not on the board. I don't make decisions. I'm just labor. Kitchen help. Someone who shows up and does what he's told. Do-hyun's expression shifted to something vulnerable. It's the freest I've felt in 20 years. They moved to a quieter corner, sat at a table scarred with years of use. I got your note, Eliora said, about the investigation report. Did it help? Knowing the full truth? It hurt. But yes, it helped. It confirmed what Marcus and I already suspected. That Daniel didn't die because of bad luck or an unavoidable accident. He died because a system prioritized speed over safety, and people like you signed off on that system without questioning it. People like me. Do-hyun didn't flinch from the words. You're right. I was exactly that person. I still am, in some ways. I still catch myself thinking in terms of efficiency and liability instead of human cost. But I'm trying to unlearn it. Why? Because I can't live with who I was. Because I sat on a sidewalk holding bread that should have fed your son. And for the first time in years, I felt the weight of real kindness. Because you looked at me in that conference room and saw through every lie I told myself. He met her eyes. Because you made me want to be someone who deserved the bread you gave me. Eliora felt tears threatening. Do-hyun, you can't earn redemption by serving soup. You can't erase 19 deaths by funding community centers. I know. I'm not trying to erase anything. I'm just trying to do less harm going forward. To use what I have left, money, connections, privilege, to support people building real solutions instead of using power to maintain systems that kill them. And then what? You serve soup for the rest of your life? You hide in this building pretending you weren't a CEO? I'm not hiding. Everyone here knows who I am. They know what I did. Some of them are families of workers who died at Hansong sites. Do-hyun gestured to a woman at a nearby table, feeding 2 young children. That's Maria Santos. Her husband died in the same collapse that killed Daniel. She told me the first day I showed up that she didn't forgive me, and probably never would. But she also said if I was serious about making amends, I could start by washing dishes. So that's what I do. Eliora looked at Maria Santos. At the exhaustion in her posture, the careful way she made the meal stretch for her children, the weight of survival that Eliora recognized intimately. Then back at Do-hyun, at this man who'd traded a penthouse for jeans and sweaters, who'd traded authority for accountability, who was learning to carry his guilt without performing redemption. I don't know what to do with you, Eliora said quietly. I don't know if this is real or if you're just finding a more sophisticated way to feel better about yourself. Neither do I, Do-hyun admitted. I wake up every morning not knowing if I'm actually changing or just acting out some fantasy of redemption. But I keep showing up because it's the only thing I know how to do that isn't actively harmful. Do you miss it? The power, the control, the empire. Every day. And then I hate myself for missing it. And then I remind myself that the part of me that wants it back is the same part that signed Daniel's death warrant. Eliora reached across the table, took his hand. His fingers were rougher than they'd been 3 months ago, calloused from work, instead of smooth from manicures. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said. I might never be ready. But I'm ready to stop seeing you as just the enemy. I'm ready to see you as someone trying to become better, Even if better will never be enough. Do-hyun's eyes shone. That's more than I deserve. Maybe. But it's what I can give right now. They sat in silence, their hands linked across a scarred table in a community center built from the ruins of an empire, while around them people ate and worked and survived together. Eventually, Do-hyun asked, Would you let me buy you coffee? Not as an apology or an attempt to fix anything. Just as two people trying to figure out how to be human. I don't think you can afford the kind of coffee you used to buy, Eliora said with a small smile. Good. Then we'll get the kind normal people drink. They left the center together, walking side by side through winter streets where Eliora had spent years surviving alone, and Do-hyun had spent years being untouchable. They found a small cafe, the kind with mismatched mugs and a chalkboard menu, where coffee cost $3 instead of $12, and sat across from each other without armor, without pretense. Just two people broken by different forces trying to figure out if healing could happen in proximity. Tell me about Marcus, Do-hyun said. I want to know about your son. So Eliora told him. About Marcus's quiet strength. About how he'd become an adult too fast. About the letter he'd kept hidden for months because he didn't know how to carry the weight of his father's prescience. About how he'd given her permission to be more than grief. And Do-hyun listened without offering solutions or money or programs, just listened, the way you listen to someone whose story matters. He sounds extraordinary, Do-hyun said when she finished. He is. And he's the reason I can't afford to make mistakes about who to trust. I understand. And I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking for the chance to prove I'm trying to be someone worthy of eventual trust. That could take years. Then I'll spend years trying. They finished their coffee as the winter sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. When they parted on the sidewalk, Eliora felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not love, but the tentative first step toward believing that people could actually change if they were willing to break all the way down first. The lawsuit settled in August. Hansung Group, now led by Jin, now hemorrhaging investors and contracts, agreed to pay $280 million to the 73 plaintiff families. The settlement included requirements for independent safety oversight at all subsidiary sites, annual public reporting of workplace incidents, and a ban on NDAs in workplace death cases. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was more than most families ever got. Eliora's share, as Daniel's widow, was $3.2 million after legal fees. The number was so large it felt abstract, impossible. She stared at the settlement check for 3 days before depositing it, half convinced it would bounce or disappear or turn out to be some elaborate mistake. Marcus looked at the bank statement and whispered, Mom, we're not poor anymore. No, Eliora agreed. We're not. But money didn't erase grief. It didn't bring Daniel back. It didn't undo 3 years of double shifts and skipped meals and nights when Eliora had cried silently in the bathroom so Marcus wouldn't hear. It just meant the next chapter wouldn't be written in the language of survival. Eliora kept working at the bakery, not because she needed the money, but because she needed the rhythm, the bread, Mrs. Park's steady presence. She quit the cleaning job at Hanseong Tower. She donated a quarter of the settlement to Dante's coalition. She set up a trust fund for Marcus's education. She paid off every debt Daniel had left behind. And every week, she went to the Northside Workers Resource Center and saw Do-hyun washing dishes, serving meals, fixing broken plumbing, doing the invisible labor that kept the center running. They didn't talk much at first. They existed in parallel. Eliora volunteering with job training programs, Do-hyun maintaining the building, 2 orbits that occasionally intersected in the kitchen or at community dinners. They were careful around each other, respectful of the grief and guilt that lived between them like a third presence. But slowly, carefully, something began to shift. It started with small things. Do-hyun learning Eliora's coffee order and having it ready when she arrived. Eliora bringing extra bread from the bakery when she knew the center was hosting a large dinner. Conversations that moved from logistics to actual topics. Books they'd read, news they'd seen, memories that hurt less when shared. In October, Eliora found Do-hyun sitting alone in the center's courtyard at dusk, looking exhausted. "Hard day?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Every day is hard. Some are just harder." He glanced at her. "Maria Santos's younger son asked me today why his dad had to die. He's 7. How do you answer that?" "What did you say?" "I told him his dad tried to keep people safe, and sometimes the world doesn't listen to the people trying to do the right thing. I told him his dad was brave." Do-hyun's voice broke slightly. "I didn't tell him his dad died because I was too busy to read a safety report. That felt like a burden a 7-year-old shouldn't have to carry. But you carry it. Every day. And I should. It's mine to carry." Eliora took his hand. Not romantically, just human contact between two people sitting with impossible weight. "Do-hyun, you're allowed to put it down sometimes. Carrying guilt every single moment doesn't make the deaths less tragic. It just makes you less able to actually help the people who are still here. How do you do it?" His voice was raw. "How do you survive Daniel's death without letting it consume you?" "I don't survive it. I live next to it. Grief isn't something you get over. It's something you learn to carry alongside everything else. The joy, the work, the love that still exists, even though he's gone." She squeezed his hand. "You're trying to carry guilt the same way I carried grief, as if the size of your suffering proves the size of your love. But it doesn't work that way. Then how does it work? You let yourself be human. You let yourself have moments where you're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. You let other people see you as more than your guilt. And if I don't deserve that? None of us deserve anything, Do-hyun. We just choose what we're going to do with the life we have left." They sat in silence as the city lights came on around them. Two people learning to exist in the space between guilt and grace. In November, Marcus came to the center for the first time. Eliora didn't force it. She'd mentioned several times that Do-hyun volunteered there, that he was trying to make amends, that maybe Marcus might want to see for himself what that looked like. Marcus had always changed the subject. Then one evening, he showed up. Do-hyun was in the kitchen when Marcus walked in. 17 now, taller than his father had been, carrying Daniel's features and Eliora's intensity. Do-hyun looked up from the rice he was washing and went completely still. Marcus stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "You're him," Marcus said. Not a question. "I'm him." Do-hyun set down the rice. "You're Marcus." "Yeah." They looked at each other across the kitchen, the man who'd signed the death warrant and the son left behind. "I don't forgive you," Marcus said flatly. "I probably never will. My dad wrote a letter saying people were going to die, and you didn't read it. That's not something I can just get over. I know. And I'm not asking you to. But my mom says you're trying to be better. And I wanted to see if that was bullshit, or if you actually meant it." Do-hyun gestured to the center around them. "This is what I mean. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's what I can do." Marcus walked farther into the kitchen, assessed the industrial stove, the prep tables, the organizational system that had Do-hyun's careful logic written all over it. "You cook here?" "I help. I'm not very good at it yet, but I'm learning. My dad used to cook." Marcus's voice was steady but tight. "He made the best pancakes. Every Sunday, if he wasn't working, he'd make chocolate chip pancakes and we'd watch cartoons." Do-hyun's eyes glistened. "He sounds like he was a wonderful father. He was the best father. And you took him away from me." Marcus's voice finally cracked. "You took him away, and no amount of serving soup is going to bring him back. But my mom is happier now than she's been in 3 years, and part of that is because of you. Not because of the money or the settlement, but because you stopped lying. So I don't know what to do with you. You don't have to do anything with me, Marcus. You don't owe me forgiveness or acceptance or even tolerance. You just need to take care of your mom and yourself. She likes you." It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. Not romantically, at least not yet. But she respects you. And that's confusing as hell because you're supposed to be the villain. I am the villain, Do-hyun said quietly. I'm just trying to figure out if villains can become something else if they actually do the work. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then, my mom says you wash dishes here. Yes. Good. Because this place is going to need a lot of dishes washed tonight. We're hosting a dinner for 80 people. Marcus grabbed an apron from the hook, tossed it to Do-hyun. So let's see if you're actually committed or if you're just performing redemption. They worked side by side for the next 4 hours, Marcus prepping vegetables with the efficiency of someone who'd helped his mother cook through years of scarcity, Do-hyun washing dishes with the methodical focus of someone trying to prove something. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. But when the dinner service was over and the last dish was clean, Marcus said, "You can come to dinner at our place. Next week, if you want." Do-hyun looked stunned. Marcus, you don't have to. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because my mom has been alone for 3 years and she deserves to have people around who actually care about her as a person, not as a widow or a settlement or a symbol. And apparently, you're one of those people now. So come to dinner. But if you hurt her, I'll destroy you in ways the lawsuit never could. Understood. Marcus left, and Do-hyun stood in the empty kitchen with tears streaming down his face, overcome by the impossible generosity of a 17-year-old who had every right to hate him and instead had offered conditional, grudging acceptance. Eliora found him there 20 minutes later, still crying. "Marcus invited me to dinner," Do-hyun managed. "I know. He texted me." Eliora handed him a clean towel. "Are you going to come?" "If you want me to." "Do-hyun." Eliora's voice was gentle. "I want you to. Not because I've forgiven you for Daniel's death. I'm still figuring out how to hold that alongside everything else. But because you've spent 6 months showing up, doing the work, being honest about your guilt instead of performing redemption. And I think that matters. I think maybe we can build something new. Not a replacement for what was lost, but something different, if we're both willing to try. What if I fail? What if I slip back into old patterns, into thinking like a CEO instead of a person? Then I'll call you on it, and you'll do better. That's how growth works. It's messy and imperfect and requires constant course correction. But it's possible. You've already proved that." Do-hyun took her hand, calloused from work now, both of them marked by labor, and held it like a lifeline. "I'll come to dinner," he said. "Thank you for letting me." The dinner was scheduled for Wednesday at 7 p.m. Do-hyun arrived at 6:57 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine he'd spent 2 hours selecting. Not expensive enough to seem like showing off, not cheap enough to seem careless, just something thoughtful that might pair well with whatever they were having. He'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on jeans and a button-down shirt that split the difference between casual and respectful. He stood outside the apartment door, heart pounding, feeling more nervous than he'd ever felt before a board meeting or investor presentation. This mattered more. He knocked. Marcus opened the door. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The teenager and the man, the son and the CEO, the person left behind and the person responsible. Then Marcus stepped aside. "Come in. Mom's finishing up dinner." The apartment was small but immaculately kept, the kind of space maintained by someone who couldn't afford clutter, who'd learned to make every item earn its place. Photos covered one wall. Daniel and Eliora on their wedding day, baby Marcus, family trips to parks and beaches, moments frozen from a life interrupted. Do-hyun looked at them and felt the full weight of what he'd destroyed. Not abstract statistics, but this specific family, this specific joy. "He was 40 when he died," Marcus said, following Do-hyun's gaze. "People kept telling us it was young, like that made it more tragic. But I just keep thinking he had so much life left. Things he was supposed to see me do. Things he was supposed to teach me. What would you want him to teach you? How to be a good man. How to do hard work without letting it break you. How to love someone the way he loved my mom. Completely. Without holding anything back. Marcus's voice was steady but strained. He wasn't perfect. He worked too much sometimes. He got stressed about money. But he showed up. Every single day he showed up for us. You're becoming a good man without him, Do-hyun said quietly. The way you protect your mother, the way you're navigating grief, the way you're giving me a chance I don't deserve. That's all you, Marcus. That's the man your father helped you start to become before he died. Marcus nodded, swallowed hard. Mom's in the kitchen. She's been cooking since 4. She does that when she's nervous. Elira appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, not armor, just herself. Her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and tired and real. You came, she said. You invited me. Do-hyun handed her the wine. Thank you. For this. Don't thank me until you've tasted the food. I'm out of practice cooking for more than 2. The table was set with mismatched plates, the kind you accumulated over years, from thrift stores and hand-me-downs and wedding gifts that survived everything else. But it was set carefully, with cloth napkins and water glasses, and a centerpiece of grocery store flowers that Marcus had probably picked up on the way home from school. They sat. Eliora brought out the food: roasted chicken, rice and beans, salad, bread from Mrs. Park's bakery. Simple food, made with care, portioned to have leftovers because that was how you survived. For the first few minutes they ate in awkward silence. Then Marcus said, So, Do-hyun, tell us something about you that isn't about being a CEO or feeling guilty. Do-hyun blinked. I'm not sure I know how to do that. Try. What do you like? What do you do when you're not working or punishing yourself? Do-hyun thought for a long moment. I used to read. Historical fiction mostly. Novels about people making impossible choices in impossible situations. I haven't read anything in years. There was never time. But I've been trying to start again. What are you reading now? Eliora asked. A book about a Japanese businessman in the 1950s trying to rebuild after the war. He loses everything, his company, his reputation, his family's respect, and has to figure out who he is when all the structures that defined him are gone. It's... Do-hyun smiled slightly. Uncomfortably relevant. Does he figure it out? I don't know yet. I'm only halfway through. I hope he does, Marcus said quietly. Figure it out, I mean. Because the alternative, staying broken forever, that doesn't help anyone. They ate. They talked. Do-hyun asked Marcus about school, and Marcus talked about his plans for college, about wanting to study engineering like his father, but also wanting to understand policy, advocacy, how to change systems from the inside. He talked about the scholarship he'd received, funded partially by the Community Coalition, partially by the settlement money Eliora had donated. I want to build things that don't kill people, Marcus said bluntly. I want to be the kind of engineer who reads the safety reports and stops the project if something's wrong. I want to be what my dad needed and didn't have. That's a powerful purpose, Do-hyun said. And you'll be excellent at it. How do you know? Because you're already thinking about the human cost before you've even started the technical training. That's what most people never learn. After dinner, Marcus excused himself to finish homework, leaving Eliora and Do-hyun alone at the table. He's extraordinary, Do-hyun said. You've raised an extraordinary person. We raised him together. Eliora's voice caught. Daniel and I. Even though Daniel's been gone for 3 years, he's still here in everything Marcus does, everything he is. I robbed him of his father. Yes, you did. And that's something I don't know how to reconcile. How to hold anger about that alongside this. She gestured between them. This tentative friendship, or whatever it's becoming. How to honor Daniel's memory while also allowing myself to connect with you. Do-hyun reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. Eliora, if this, whatever this is, feels like a betrayal of Daniel, we can stop. I can disappear. I can keep volunteering at the center but stay away from you and Marcus. I don't want to add to your pain. It's not that simple. Eliora closed the distance, took his hand. You're not adding to my pain. You're just complicating it. Because you're the person responsible for Daniel's death, and you're also the person who broke himself open to expose the truth about it. You're the villain and the ally. The person I should hate, and the person I'm starting to... She stopped. Starting to what? Starting to care about. Not as a replacement for Daniel. Not as some romantic fantasy of redemption. But as a person who's doing the hardest work I've ever seen anyone do. Choosing to dismantle everything you were to become someone better. That matters to me, Do-hyun. It matters more than I want it to. Do-hyun's eyes shone. I wake up every morning terrified that I'm going to slip back. That I'm going to make a decision based on efficiency instead of humanity. That I'm going to hurt someone else because I'm still fundamentally the person who signed those papers. Then I'll be there to remind you who you're trying to become. And you'll do the same for me when I forget I'm allowed to be more than grief. They sat at the scarred table, hands linked. Two people who'd both lost everything, trying to figure out if they could build something new from the ruins. Marcus appeared in the doorway. Mom, I'm going to bed. Do-hyun, you can stay if you want. Just don't make it weird. After he left, Eliora laughed. The first genuine, unguarded laugh Do-hyun had ever heard from her. He gave you permission, she said. That's as close to approval as you're going to get for a while. I'll take it. They moved to the couch. Do-hyun noticed Daniel's toolbox sitting on a shelf. Marcus must have kept it, displayed it as a memorial. Inside would be the letter that had started everything, the words that had exposed a system built on silence. Do you think he'd hate me? Do-hyun asked suddenly. Daniel, if he could see this, you and me talking, me sitting in his home, do you think he'd hate me for it? Eliora considered. I think he'd hate what you did. I think he'd be furious about the system you represented. But Daniel was also practical. He'd want me to survive. He'd want Marcus to have opportunities. And if that meant accepting help from someone who was trying to make amends... She paused. I think he'd give you exactly what Marcus gave you. Conditional, skeptical acceptance. A chance to prove you mean it. And what do you give me? Eliora turned to face him fully. I give you honesty. I give you the space to keep trying. I give you my respect for what you've done, even if I can't give you forgiveness yet. And maybe, eventually, I give you something more. But we're not there yet. When will we be there? I don't know. When I stop flinching every time I think about Daniel's death and your signature in the same breath. When Marcus can look at you without seeing the man who took his father. When you can look at yourself without drowning in guilt. She touched his face gently. When we're both healed enough to build something that isn't just trauma bonding disguised as connection. Do-hyun leaned into her touch. That could take years. Then we have years. I'm not going anywhere, are you? No. I'm here for as long as you'll let me be. They sat together as the city hummed beyond the thin walls, as Marcus slept in the next room, as Daniel's memory held space between them. Not as a barrier, but as a presence that demanded honesty, demanded that whatever they built be worthy of the loss that had brought them together. At 10 p.m., Do-hyun stood to leave. Eliora walked him to the door. Same time next week? She asked. If you'll have me, I'll have you. He started to bow, an old habit from his Korean upbringing, then caught himself and offered a handshake instead. Eliora ignored both and pulled him into a brief, fierce hug. Thank you for showing up, she whispered, for not running when it got hard, for being brave enough to break. Thank you for letting me try to be better than I was. He left. Eliora closed the door and leaned against it, her heart full of complicated emotions that didn't have names. Grief and hope. Anger and respect. The bone-deep exhaustion of survival and the tentative possibility of something more. In his room, Marcus heard the door close and allowed himself the smallest smile. Maybe people could change. Maybe villains could become something else. Maybe his mom deserved happiness even if it came from an impossible source. He pulled out his phone and texted Do-hyun's number, which he'd gotten from his mother's phone without asking. "You break her heart. I break everything you have left. But you were okay tonight. Keep showing up like that." The response came 2 minutes later. "Understood. Thank you for giving me the chance. I won't waste it." Marcus set his phone down and stared at the ceiling, thinking about his father's letter, about the system that had failed him, about the man who'd signed the papers and was now washing dishes and trying to earn redemption through labor instead of money. It was messy. It was complicated. It wasn't the clean narrative of good versus evil. But maybe that was how real life worked. The Northside Workers Resource Center celebrated its first anniversary in March. What had started as a single converted warehouse had grown into a network. The main center with its kitchen and meeting spaces, a satellite office providing legal aid for workers facing exploitation, a partnership with 3 local unions to offer apprenticeship programs, and a scholarship fund for children of workers killed or injured on the job. The anniversary celebration was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon, open house style, with food and music and a chance for the community to see what had been built with money from a dismantled empire and labor from people who refused to let tragedy be the final word. Do-hyun arrived early to help set up. He'd been living in a modest apartment 6 blocks from the center for the past 8 months. 2 rooms, secondhand furniture, nothing like the penthouse he'd once occupied. He took the bus to work. He cooked his own meals. He'd learned to fix leaking faucets and unclog drains and do the maintenance labor that kept buildings functional. He was no longer a chairman. He was just Do-hyun, someone trying to be useful. Dante found him in the kitchen arranging bread from Mrs. Park's bakery. "You know you don't have to do this anymore," Dante said. "You've more than earned your place here. You can stop performing penance." "It's not penance. It's just work." Do-hyun arranged the last loaf. "And I like having work that matters on a human scale instead of an empire scale." "Fair enough. But Do-hyun, and I'm saying this as someone who was extremely skeptical of you at the beginning, you've proved yourself. The community trusts you. The families trust you. You've moved from CEO trying to buy redemption to person who actually gives a damn. That's rare. Thank you, Dante. That means more than you know. So maybe stop punishing yourself every waking moment and allow yourself to be happy occasionally." Dante nodded toward the door, where Eliora had just entered carrying boxes of supplies, Marcus behind her with more. "Especially since some people here would like to see you happy." Do-hyun watched Eliora laugh at something Marcus said, watched the ease between them, the healing that had happened slowly over months of stability and support. The settlement money had changed their material circumstances, but the real transformation had been internal. Eliora, allowing herself to dream beyond survival. Marcus, allowing himself to imagine a future that included justice and joy. Eliora saw Do-hyun watching and smiled. Not the careful, guarded expression she'd worn for so long, but something open and genuine. Do-hyun's heart did something complicated in his chest. Over the past months, their relationship had deepened into something neither of them had planned. Weekly dinners at Eliora's apartment had become twice weekly, then 3 times. They'd started taking walks together after center events, talking about everything and nothing. Books they'd read, news that mattered, memories that hurt less when shared. They'd navigated Marcus's birthday together. Do-hyun careful not to intrude, but present enough to help celebrate. They'd sat together in silence on the anniversary of Daniel's death, honoring the loss without pretending it could be fixed. And gradually, carefully, touch had entered the equation. Hands held during difficult conversations. A hug that lasted slightly longer than friendly. Do-hyun's arm around Eliora's shoulders when they watched Marcus receive his scholarship award. Small intimacies that acknowledged they were becoming something more than grief-connected allies. But they hadn't named it. Hadn't pushed it. Both of them too aware of how fragile healing was, how easily they could damage what they were building. Now, at the anniversary celebration, With the center full of families and workers and volunteers, Do-hyun felt the weight of what they'd built together. Not just the physical space, but the community, the trust, the slow transformation from tragedy into purpose. Maria Santos approached him, her 2 sons in tow. The older one, the 7-year-old who'd asked Do-hyun why his father had to die, carried a drawing, physical space, but the community, the trust, the slow transformation from tragedy into purpose. Maria Santos approached him, her 2 sons in tow. The older one, the 7-year-old who'd asked Do-hyun why his father had to die, carried a drawing. "Mr. Do-hyun, I made this for you." The boy held out the paper. It showed the center, recognizable by the large windows and the sign, surrounded by stick figures holding hands. In careful letters across the top, "Thank you for helping us." Do-hyun knelt down to the boy's level. "Thank you, Miguel. This is beautiful. Can I hang it in the kitchen?" "Yes. And Mr. Do-hyun, you know what?" "What?" "Mom says you're a good person now. She says you made mistakes before, but you're trying to fix them. Is that true?" Do-hyun glanced at Maria, who nodded slightly. Permission to be honest. "It's true, Miguel. I made very big mistakes that hurt a lot of people, including your family. I can't undo those mistakes. But I'm trying every day to do better, to help instead of hurt. Does that make sense?" Miguel considered this seriously. "Like when I accidentally broke Carlos's toy and I said sorry and helped him build a new one. Exactly like that. Except my broken toy was much bigger and much more important." "Okay. As long as you keep helping." Miguel paused. "My dad would want people to keep helping each other." Do-hyun's eyes burned. "Your dad was right, and I promise to keep helping." After Miguel ran off to join the other children, Maria lingered. "He talks about Roberto more now," she said quietly. "The counseling has helped. The stability has helped. Having a community that acknowledges what happened instead of pretending it didn't. That's helped most of all. I'm glad. Your sons deserve to remember their father proudly. They do. And Mr. Ri, Do-hyun, I want you to know something." Maria took a breath. "I was furious when you first showed up here. I wanted to spit in your face. You represented everything that had destroyed my family. But you kept coming back. You didn't perform redemption. You just worked. You listened. You admitted guilt without making it about your feelings. And slowly, I stopped seeing you as the enemy and started seeing you as someone genuinely trying to change. Maria, I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not sure I ever will. But I accept that you're trying. And I accept that this center, this community, exists because you chose to break your old life completely instead of just rearranging it. That takes courage. So thank you for having the courage to actually change." She squeezed his shoulder and moved away, leaving Do-hyun standing in the middle of the celebration, trying not to cry. Eliora appeared at his elbow. "You okay?" "Maria just told me she accepts that I'm trying. Miguel gave me a drawing. I'm so far from okay that I've circled back around to something like peace. Peace is good. Peace is progress." Eliora took his hand openly, not hiding it, not making a show of it, just claiming connection. "Come on. Dante's about to make a speech and we should both be up there." "Why me?" "Because this center exists because you chose truth over empire. People should see that. People should know that change is possible, even from the most unlikely sources." They moved to the front of the room. Dante called for attention, thanked the volunteers and donors and families who'd built the center into what it was. Then he gestured to Eliora and Do-hyun. "These two people shouldn't work together," Dante said bluntly. "On paper, they're separated by everything. Class, power, history, pain. Eliora lost her husband because of decisions Do-hyun signed off on. That's an unbridgeable gap." The room was silent. But they bridged it anyway. Not by pretending the gap didn't exist. Not by minimizing the harm or performing redemption theater. They bridged it by both choosing to be honest about what happened and what it cost. Dante looked at them. Eliora refused to accept charity when it would have been easier to take the money and disappear. Do-hyun refused to hide behind corporate structures when it would have been easier to let someone else take the fall. And together, they've built something that actually helps people instead of just making the powerful feel better about themselves. Applause rippled through the room. So on this 1-year anniversary, Dante continued, I want to say thank you. To Eliora, for demanding truth even when silence would have been safer. To Do-hyun, for choosing to lose everything rather than keep lying. And to every family here who's trusted us with your stories, your pain, your hope that maybe the next worker won't die because someone actually listened. More applause. Eliora stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. I'm not a public speaker. I'm a baker and a mother and someone who spent 3 years just trying to survive. But I learned something in the past year that I want to share. She paused. I learned that justice and healing aren't always the same thing. Sometimes justice is a lawsuit, and a settlement, and structural changes that prevent future deaths. That's important. That's necessary. But healing is something different. Healing is allowing yourself to be more than the worst thing that happened to you. Healing is building community with people who should be your enemies, but choose to be your allies instead. She looked at Do-hyun. I lost my husband because a system prioritized profit over safety. That's unforgivable. But I gained a community, a purpose, and proof that even people who benefit from broken systems can choose to break those systems when confronted with the human cost. So thank you all for showing up, for trusting that we could build something better from the ashes of what was destroyed. When the formal speeches ended and the party resumed, Marcus found Do-hyun near the food table. That was intense, Marcus said. Your mother is incredible. Yeah, she is. And she's happy. Like, actually happy. Not just surviving or pretending things are okay. Happy. Marcus looked at Do-hyun directly. That's because of you. Partially. The settlement helped. The community helped. Time helped. But you helped too. You gave her something to believe in. The idea that people can actually change if they're willing to destroy everything they were. Marcus, I don't know what to say. Say you're going to keep showing up. Say you're not going to disappoint her. Marcus's voice hardened slightly. Say you understand that if you break her heart after everything she's survived, you'll answer to me. I understand. And I'll keep showing up. For as long as she'll let me. Good. Marcus grabbed a piece of bread. Also, she's in love with you. She hasn't said it. She's too stubborn and too scared. But she is, just so you know. He walked away before Do-hyun could respond, leaving Do-hyun standing frozen with the weight of that revelation. She's in love with you. Do-hyun had spent a year trying to earn the right to exist in Eliora's orbit. He'd dismantled his empire, exposed his guilt, worked menial jobs, learned to be human instead of powerful. He'd done it because it was right, because he couldn't keep being what he'd been, because Eliora's act of simple kindness had broken something open in him that couldn't be closed again. He hadn't done it to win her love. But now that Marcus had said it, now that the possibility existed, Do-hyun felt something shift in his chest. Hope, terror, the bone-deep desire to be worthy of what was being offered. He found Eliora in the courtyard, watching children play. Marcus told me something, Do-hyun said. That sounds ominous. He told me you're in love with me. Eliora went still. Then, he has a big mouth. Is it true? She turned to face him, her expression vulnerable and defiant simultaneously. I don't know. Maybe. I know I think about you constantly. I know I'm happier when you're around. I know that somewhere in the past year, you stopped being the man whose signature killed my husband and started being just you. Someone I respect and care about and want in my life. She swallowed hard. But I don't know if that's love or trauma bonding or just gratitude for someone who actually followed through on trying to change. And if it is love, then I'm terrified. Because loving you feels like betraying Daniel. Because you'll always be the person who signed those papers no matter how much you've changed. Because what if you slip back? What if the Empire calls and you realize you miss power more than you miss being human? Do-hyun took her hands. Eleora, I can't promise I'll never make mistakes. I can't promise I won't sometimes think like a CEO instead of a person. But I can promise that I'll never go back to being what I was. That I'll never prioritize efficiency over human cost. That I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be someone worthy of the bread you shared with a stranger. And if I let myself love you, if I take that risk, then I'll spend every day trying to deserve it. Eleora looked at him. At this man who'd destroyed and rebuilt himself. Who'd chosen truth over comfort. Who'd learned to wash dishes and listen to grieving children and exist without armor. I need time, she said finally. I need to sit with this. I need to make sure it's real and not just the intensity of what we've survived together. Can you give me that? I can give you all the time you need. Even if it takes months, years. Even then. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. Brief, chaste, but full of promise. Thank you, she whispered. For waiting. For not pushing. For being patient while I figure out how to let myself be happy again. They stood together in the courtyard, the center full of life behind them. The future uncertain but no longer terrifying. Two people learning that sometimes the hardest part of healing is allowing yourself to believe it's possible. It took Eleora 3 weeks to make her decision. 3 weeks of weighing past against future, grief against possibility, fear against hope. She talked to Mrs. Park, who told her that 40 years was too long to live in the shadow of loss. She talked to Marcus, who said he wanted her to be happy, even if happiness came from a complicated source. She talked to Dante, who pointed out that she'd spent a year watching Do-hyun prove himself. If she didn't trust the evidence of her own eyes, what would it take? Most importantly, she talked to Daniel. Not literally. She wasn't that far into grief anymore. But in her mind, in the conversations she still had with him when the apartment was quiet, and the weight of decisions felt too heavy to carry alone. What would you want for me? She asked the memory of her husband. Would you want me to spend the rest of my life alone because the person I'm drawn to is connected to your death? Or would you want me to live? She thought Daniel would choose life. He'd always been practical, even in his idealism. He'd wanted justice for workers, but he'd also wanted his family to thrive. He'd died trying to protect others, but he'd lived trying to give Eleora and Marcus the best life possible. He wouldn't want her frozen in grief forever. On a Tuesday evening in April, Eleora asked Do-hyun to meet her at the pier, a quiet spot overlooking the water, far enough from both their apartments and the center to feel neutral, to feel like space where hard conversations could happen. Do-hyun arrived exactly on time, wearing jeans and a sweater that Eleora had never seen him in before. New clothes, not remnants of his CEO life. His hair was longer now, less perfectly styled. He looked younger somehow, or maybe just less burdened. They sat on a bench facing the water. I've been thinking, Eleora began. That sounds serious. It is. I've been thinking about what it means to move forward. What it means to honor Daniel's memory, while also allowing myself to have a future that doesn't look like the past. She took a breath. And I've realized something. I'm not stuck anymore. The settlement gave me financial stability. The center gave me purpose. Marcus is thriving. I've spent 3 years surviving, and I'm finally at a place where I can do more than just survive. That's incredible, Eleora. And part of that, a big part, is you. She turned to face him. You broke yourself open. You exposed the truth. You've spent a year proving that people can actually change if they're willing to do the work. And somewhere in watching you do that, I stopped seeing you as the enemy and started seeing you as a partner in trying to build something better. Do-hyun's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to try. I want to see if this thing between us, this respect and care and attraction, can become something more. I want to see if we can build a relationship that honors what was lost while also creating something new. She took his hand. But I need you to understand something first. This isn't forgiveness. I don't forgive you for Daniel's death. I don't think I ever will. That's a wound that will always exist, and I need you to be okay with that. I am. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. And I need you to understand that there will be hard days. Days when I look at you and only see the signature on those papers. Days when the grief is so heavy I can't carry anything else. Days when I push you away because letting you close feels like betraying Daniel. I understand. And on those days I'll give you space. I'll wait. I'll remind you that I'm here when you're ready. And I need you to promise me that you'll be honest. That if you start slipping back into old patterns, into thinking like a CEO, into prioritizing efficiency over humanity, you'll tell me. That you won't hide it or pretend you've completely changed. Because change is ongoing, not a destination. And I need a partner who understands that. I promise. Complete honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Eliora cupped his face with both hands. Then yes, let's try. Let's see if two people broken by different forces can build something whole together. Do-hyun kissed her, softly, carefully, like someone handling something precious and fragile. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like salt air and possibility, and the particular sweetness of choosing hope after prolonged darkness. When they pulled apart, both of them had tears on their faces. I love you, Do-hyun said. I know it's too soon to say it. I know it's complicated, but I need you to know. I love you. Not because you saved me on that sidewalk. Not because I'm trying to earn redemption. But because you're the strongest, most principled person I've ever met, and you make me want to be better than I am. I love you too, Eliora whispered. And I'm terrified. But I'm also ready. Ready to stop living in the past. Ready to build something new. Ready to see where this goes. They sat on the pier until the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the city lights beginning to glow in the distance. They talked about practicalities, how to navigate a relationship given their history, how to support each other through the inevitable difficult moments, how to build something healthy instead of codependent. We should probably go slow, Eliora said. Not move in together immediately or anything dramatic. Just date. Like normal people. I don't think we'll ever be normal people. Fair, but we can try. Do-hyun smiled, the first fully unguarded smile she'd seen from him. Okay, let's try being not normal people who date. Starting with dinner. Real dinner, at a restaurant, where we don't talk about the center or settlements or guilt. Just two people getting to know each other. I'd like that. When? Friday. There's a small Italian place near my apartment. Nothing fancy, just good food. It's a date. They walked back toward the bus stop, hands linked, both of them feeling the strange lightness of having made a choice. Not a perfect choice, not an easy one, but a choice that felt true to who they'd become in the aftermath of tragedy. At the bus stop, Eliora's phone buzzed. Text from Marcus. Mom, please tell me you finally told him how you feel. I can't handle any more of this slow burn tension. Eliora laughed and showed Do-hyun the message. Your son is very invested in our relationship, Do-hyun observed. He wants me to be happy. And he's learned to trust you. That's huge, Do-hyun. That's maybe the biggest endorsement you could get. I won't take it for granted. I know you won't. That's why I'm willing to try. The bus arrived. They rode together toward Eliora's neighborhood, sitting close but not clinging, comfortable in the silence that came from knowing hard conversations had been had and decisions had been made. When they reached her stop, Eliora kissed him goodbye. Longer this time, deeper, a promise of more to come. Friday, she said. 7 p.m. Don't be late. I wouldn't dare. She walked into her building, and Do-hyun rode the bus home, his heart full of cautious hope and the particular joy that comes from being given a chance you spent a year earning. In her apartment, Eliora found Marcus waiting up. So? He asked. So we're going to try. We're going to date and see where it goes." "Good. You deserve to be happy, Mom. Even if happy is complicated. All the best things are complicated." She hugged her son. "Thank you for giving me permission to move forward. You didn't need my permission, but I'm glad I could give it anyway." They stood in the small kitchen of their small apartment, so different from where they'd started 3 years ago, transformed not by the settlement money, but by the slow work of healing, and felt the presence of Daniel between them, not as a weight, but as a witness, a person who'd loved them enough to want their happiness even in his absence. That night, Eliora lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the journey from sidewalk to here, from bread shared with a stranger to love tentatively claimed. It hadn't been linear, it hadn't been easy, but it had been real. And maybe that was enough. The first official date happened on Friday at the Italian restaurant, and it was wonderfully ordinary. They ate pasta. They drank wine. They talked about books and movies and the small details of daily life that had nothing to do with tragedy or redemption. Eliora told stories about Mrs. Park's eccentric customers at the bakery. Do-hyun confessed that he'd joined a book club, an actual neighborhood book club where he was the only man under 60, and was slowly learning how to have opinions about novels instead of just efficiency metrics. It felt normal. It felt human. They went on more dates. Coffee shops and walks through parks, and a museum exhibit on immigrant workers that made them both cry for different reasons. They learned each other's routines, favorite foods, pet peeves. Do-hyun discovered that Eliora sang off-key while baking, and that she had a weakness for cheesy romance novels she'd never admit to reading in public. Eliora learned that Do-hyun was terrible at small talk, but excellent at listening, that he still had nightmares about the Riverside collapse, that he'd memorized every name of every worker who'd died at Hanseong sites, and said them aloud every morning like a prayer or a penance. They moved slowly. Do-hyun didn't stay over at Eliora's apartment. Marcus was fine with them dating, but not ready for that step. They kept their relationship mostly private, not hiding it, but also not making it a public spectacle. The community knew, of course. It was impossible to hide anything in a neighborhood where everyone watched out for everyone else. But people were respectful, supportive even. In June, 6 weeks into officially dating, Do-hyun invited Eliora and Marcus to his apartment for dinner. It was a test of sorts. Marcus's first time in Do-hyun's space, a chance to see how the person who'd been a CEO lived now that empire was gone. The apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, second-hand furniture, bookshelves made of cinder blocks and planks. The kitchen was small but well organized. Photos covered one wall, the center on opening day, volunteers at a community dinner, Miguel's drawing that Do-hyun had framed carefully. "This is where you live?" Marcus asked, looking around with undisguised curiosity. "This is it. No penthouse anymore. Do you miss it? The money, the power, the fancy stuff?" Do-hyun considered honestly. "Sometimes. Usually when my back hurts from sleeping on a cheap mattress, or when I'm doing my own laundry, and remembering I used to pay someone to do it. But then I remember that the penthouse was built on deaths like your father's, and the back pain seems pretty minor in comparison." Marcus nodded slowly. "That's a good answer." They cooked together. Do-hyun had planned a simple Korean meal, wanting to share something of his culture, and Marcus proved surprisingly adept at following recipes. Eliora watched them work side by side, this tentative partnership between her son and her boyfriend? Partner? The label still felt strange. Over dinner, bulgogi that was slightly oversalted but made with care, Marcus asked the question Eliora had been avoiding. "So are you guys serious? Like, long-term serious?" Eliora and Do-hyun exchanged glances. "We're taking it one day at a time," Eliora said carefully. "That's a politician's answer, Mom." "Fine, yes, we're serious. We're not engaged or anything dramatic, but we're building towards something permanent, if that's okay with you." Marcus set down his fork. "Do-hyun, can I ask you something?" "Anything. If you could go back and change what happened, if you could go back and actually read those safety reports and stop the Riverside project, Would you? Yes, without hesitation. I'd trade everything I had, the company, the money, the reputation, to bring your father and the other workers back. But you can't do that. So what you're left with is Mom and me and this relationship that exists because my dad died. Doesn't that feel wrong? Like you're benefiting from the worst thing that ever happened to us? Do-hyun's face went pale, but he held Marcus's gaze. Yes, it feels deeply wrong. I think about that constantly. The fact that if I'd done my job correctly, your father would be alive, and your mother and I would never have met. That I'm only here, in this relationship, because I failed catastrophically. There's no way to make that feel right. So why do it? Why not just stay away? Because your mother asked me to try. Because after everything I destroyed, she was willing to give me a chance to build something new. And because Do-hyun's voice caught. Because I love her. And I love the person I'm becoming when I'm around her and you. I can't undo the harm I caused. But I can choose to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the chance I've been given. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, my dad used to say that people should be judged by what they do after they mess up, not just by the mess up itself. That mistakes matter, but so does how you respond to them. Your father was right. Yeah, he usually was. Marcus looked at his mother. Mom, are you happy? Like, genuinely happy. Not just making the best of things? I am, Elira said softly. It's complicated. Some days are harder than others. But yes, I'm happy. Then I guess that's what matters. Marcus turned back to Do-hyun. I'm not going to call you Dad. That's not happening. But I'll call you Do-hyun, and I'll accept that you're part of our family now. Just don't screw it up. I won't. I promise. They finished dinner. Marcus helped clean up, then excused himself to call a friend, giving Eliora and Do-hyun space to be alone. That went better than I expected, Do-hyun said, loading the dishwasher. Marcus is extraordinary. He's learned to hold complexity, to hate what happened while also accepting that people are more than the worst things they've done. He learned that from you. Maybe. Or maybe he's just better than both of us. Eliora pulled Do-hyun into an embrace. Thank you for being honest with him, for not downplaying the wrong or trying to justify it. That mattered. I won't lie to him. Or to you. That's the baseline of what I can offer. They swayed together in the small kitchen, the city humming beyond the windows, Marcus's voice a low murmur from the other room. And for the first time in 3 years, Eliora felt complete. Not because Do-hyun had replaced Daniel. He hadn't. He couldn't. But because she'd finally allowed herself to imagine a future that held both grief and joy, both memory and new love. I want to do this right, Do-hyun murmured against her hair. I want to build something with you that honors what you've survived and what we're becoming. Then keep showing up. Keep being honest. Keep washing dishes and helping workers, and being the person who broke himself to become better. I can do that. I know you can. That's why I love you. They stood together until Marcus returned. And then the three of them played a card game Do-hyun had learned from his grandmother. Simple, silly, full of laughter. And in those moments, they weren't a widow and a CEO and a grieving son. They were just 3 people choosing to build a family from the ruins of what had been destroyed. In September, 2 years and 7 months after Daniel's death, Eliora made a pilgrimage. She drove to the site where the riverside development had been built, where scaffolding had collapsed, where her husband had died trying to do the right thing. The building was complete now, gleaming glass and steel, apartments that cost more than Daniel had earned in 5 years. A monument to progress built on unmarked graves. Do-hyun went with her. She'd asked him to, needing his witness. They stood across the street, looking up at floors 15 through 22, the section where Daniel had been working, where he'd documented concerns, where the system had failed him. There should be a plaque, Eliora said quietly. Something acknowledging that men died here. Something that says their names. I'll make that happen, Do-hyun said immediately. A memorial. I'll contact the building management, donate the funds, work with the families to design something appropriate. Not your money, community funds. The families should decide what the memorial looks like, how the men are remembered. You can facilitate, but you don't get to control this. Understood. They stood in silence. Eliora thought about the last morning she'd seen Daniel alive, him kissing her goodbye, promising to be home for dinner, Marcus still asleep in his room, the ordinariness of it, the way you never know when the last time is the last time. I don't forgive you, Eliora said suddenly. Do-hyun went very still beside her. I want you to understand that. I love you. I'm building a life with you. But I don't forgive you for Daniel's death. That's not something I can do. Forgiveness implies that what happened is somehow resolved, that the scales are balanced. But they're not. They never will be. Daniel is still dead. Marcus still grew up without his father. I still spent 3 years in survival mode because your company prioritized deadlines over lives. I understand, Do-hyun said softly. But here's what I can do. Eliora turned to face him. I can accept that you're trying. I can acknowledge that you've done more to make amends than most people in your position ever would. I can love the person you're becoming while still being angry about the person you were. I can hold both truths, that you're responsible for immense harm, and that you're also genuinely working to be better. Forgiveness is too simple a word for that. It's more like coexistence, learning to live with the complexity. Coexistence I can do. That's all I'm asking for. And I need you to understand that this is permanent. You don't get to earn your way out of guilt. You don't get to reach a point where you've done enough penance and now you're absolved. You carry this forever. We both do. The difference is how we carry it. Together, Do-hyun said. We carry it together. Yes, together. They stood holding hands across the street from a building built on death and made peace with the fact that some wounds don't close. They just become part of who you are. That healing isn't about forgetting or forgiving. It's about learning to live fully, despite the hurt. A year later, the memorial was installed. It was a simple bronze plaque at the building's entrance, engraved with 3 names: Daniel Kane, Roberto Santos, James Mitchell. Below the names, a quote the families had chosen together. They tried to warn us. We should have listened. The unveiling ceremony was small, just the families, some union representatives, community members from the center. Do-hyun stood at the back, not wanting to intrude, but Maria Santos beckoned him forward. You should be here, she said. Not because you deserve celebration, but because you're part of this story, the before and the after, and people need to see that the after is possible. Do-hyun stood with the families as the plaque was revealed. He listened to Marcus read his father's letter aloud, the full text, his voice steady and clear, a public acknowledgement of the system that had failed and the man who'd tried to stop it. He watched Eliora place flowers at the memorial, her face composed, but her hands shaking slightly. And when it was over, when people were gathering for a meal at the center, Miguel Santos approached Do-hyun with a question. Mr. Do-hyun, my teacher says that people who do bad things can't become good people. She says bad people are bad forever. Is that true? Do-hyun knelt down. What do you think? I think it's not true. Because you did a really bad thing. You let my dad die. But now you help people. You wash dishes and fix things, and you made the center happen. So maybe you're both? Bad and good at the same time? That's very wise, Miguel. I think you're right. I think people are complicated. I did terrible things, and I'm trying to do better things now. That doesn't erase what I did, but it means I'm more than just the worst thing I've ever done. Okay, as long as you keep trying to be good. I will. I promise. Miguel ran off, and Do-hyun stood slowly, his eyes burning. Eliora appeared at his side. You okay? A 7-year-old just explained moral complexity better than I ever could. Kids are good at that. They haven't learned to overcomplicate things yet. She linked her arm through his. Come on. There's food, and Marcus wants you to meet his girlfriend. Apparently she's into social justice, and he wants your reformed CEO perspective on corporate accountability. He's bringing his girlfriend to meet me? He considers you family now. That means you get involved in the embarrassing parts too. They walked to the center together, part of a community that had been built from tragedy and persistence, and the hard work of transforming pain into purpose. Marcus graduated high school in June with a full scholarship to a top engineering program. The graduation was held in a rented auditorium. Families crowded into uncomfortable seats. Graduates in caps and gowns that made them look simultaneously grown and impossibly young. Eliora sat between Mrs. Park and Do-hyun, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on her son. When Marcus's name was called, Marcus Daniel Kane, full scholarship recipient, future civil engineer, Eliora broke down completely. Not quiet tears, but full sobs, all the grief and pride and relief of having survived to see this moment pouring out in a way she couldn't control. Do-hyun held her while she cried, and Mrs. Park supplied tissues, and neither of them tried to make her stop or minimize the emotion. After the ceremony, Marcus found them in the crowd. His girlfriend, a sharp, funny young woman named Keisha who wanted to study labor law, stood beside him. "Mom, you're a mess," Marcus said affectionately. "I'm a proud mess. That's allowed." Eliora hugged him fiercely. "Your father would be so proud." "I know. I felt him there, like he was watching." Marcus pulled back, looked at Do-hyun. "Both of you, Mom and Do-hyun, you made this possible. The settlement, yeah, but also the stability, the center. The proof that fighting systems can actually work. So, thank you." "You earned this, Marcus," Do-hyun said. "The scholarship, the opportunities, those are yours because of your intelligence and work ethic. Maybe. But I would have given up if I hadn't seen Mom stop just surviving and start actually living. And a lot of that transformation happened because you pushed her. Not in a creepy way, but by showing her that demanding accountability could actually lead to change." Keisha nudged Marcus. "You practiced that speech, didn't you?" "Maybe. Shut up." Marcus grinned, then grew serious again. "Do-hyun, I need to tell you something. When you first showed up, when I found out who you were, I hated you. Like viscerally hated you. I fantasized about ways to make you suffer. I wanted you to feel every bit of pain we'd felt. I know. And that was justified. But then you kept showing up. You kept doing the work without performing it. You let me be angry without trying to defend yourself. And slowly, I stopped seeing you as just the enemy and started seeing you as someone who genuinely wanted to be better." Marcus swallowed hard. "My dad died because of your company's practices. That's a fact. But you're also one of the reasons my mom is happy again, and why I believe systems can change. So I guess what I'm saying is, I approve of you and Mom, of you being part of this family. You have my blessing if that matters." Do-hyun's composure crumbled. He pulled Marcus into an embrace, the first time they'd hugged, the first physical acknowledgement of the relationship they'd built so carefully over 2 years. "It matters more than you know," Do-hyun said, his voice thick. "Thank you, Marcus, for giving me a chance, for being gracious when you had every right to be cruel, for becoming an extraordinary man despite everything you've survived." When they pulled apart, both were crying. "Okay, enough emotions," Marcus declared. "Let's go eat. I'm starving, and you guys promised me whatever I wanted." They went to Marcus's favorite restaurant, a Korean barbecue place where Do-hyun taught them the proper way to grill meat, and Marcus insisted on doing it his own way anyway. They laughed until their faces hurt. They toasted to Daniel's memory and to Marcus's future and to the improbable family they'd become. Late that night, after Marcus and Keisha had left to celebrate with friends, Eliora and Do-hyun walked home through streets that had become familiar, comfortable theirs. "He gave us his blessing," Eliora said, still slightly stunned. He did, after making me earn every second of it. As he should have. She stopped walking, turned to face him under a street lamp that cast amber light across their faces. Do-hyun, I want you to move in with us. Do-hyun went very still. Eleora. I know it's a big step. I know Marcus is about to leave for college, and maybe that changes the equation. But I don't want to live separately anymore. I don't want to split our lives between 2 apartments. I want to wake up next to you. I want to build something permanent. Are you sure? Because once I move in, once we take that step, it becomes real in a way it isn't now. It becomes a statement that we're choosing this, choosing each other, despite everything. I'm sure. I've been sure for months. I was just waiting for the right moment, and Marcus giving his approval feels like a sign. She took his hands. Move in with us. Help me pack up Daniel's things with the respect they deserve. Help me create a home that honors the past while also embracing the future. Be my partner, fully and completely. Do-hyun kissed her, deep and certain, a promise and a commitment. Yes, I'll move in. I'll build a home with you. I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of this chance. You already are. They stood under the street lamp, 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of tragedy, and made plans for a future that neither of them had imagined possible 3 years ago. Do-hyun moved into Eleora's apartment in August, after Marcus had left for college. It was a strange process, dismantling his modest bachelor space and integrating his life into a home that still held Daniel's memory in every corner. Eleora had spent weeks beforehand carefully packing Daniel's belongings, his clothes donated to workers at the center who needed them, his tools given to Marcus to take to college, his personal items, photos, letters, small treasures, preserved in boxes that would move with the family forever. I'm not erasing him, Eleora said as they worked together to make space in the closet. I need you to understand that. Daniel will always be part of this home, part of our lives. His photo stays on the wall. His memory stays in our conversations. I'm making room for you, but I'm not replacing him. I wouldn't want you to, Do-hyun replied. Daniel was your husband, Marcus's father. He deserves to be remembered. I'm just grateful to exist alongside that memory. They created a home that held complexity. Daniel's photo on the mantle next to newer pictures of Eleora, Marcus, and Do-hyun together. The toolbox with Daniel's letter displayed respectfully. Space for grief and space for new joy, coexisting in the same rooms. Marcus came home for Thanksgiving weekend in November, bringing Keisha with him. The apartment felt different with 4 people, crowded in the best way, full of conversation and laughter, and the comfortable chaos of family. Do-hyun cooked Korean dishes alongside Eleora's traditional Thanksgiving meal, creating a fusion that somehow worked. Marcus told stories about college, about his engineering classes, about the workers' rights group he'd joined on campus. I'm organizing a symposium on construction safety, Marcus said over dinner. We're bringing in families affected by workplace deaths to speak alongside engineers and policy experts. Mom, I want you to speak. And Do-hyun, I want you there too. Not to speak, but to be present. To show people that accountability can lead to real change. Marcus, I don't want to take attention away from the families, Do-hyun started. You won't. Your presence will be proof that our demands for change can actually work. That CEOs can be held responsible and can choose to transform instead of just paying settlements. Marcus looked at his mother. What do you think, Mom? Eleora considered. I'll speak. If other families are comfortable with Do-hyun being there, then yes. Let's show people what real accountability looks like. After dinner, while Eleora and Keisha cleaned up, Marcus pulled Do-hyun aside. I have something for you. He handed Do-hyun a small wrapped box. Inside was a keychain, simple metal with an engraved quote. Show up. Do better. Keep going. It's not fancy, Marcus said. But those 3 things, showing up, doing better, keeping going, that's what you've done for 3 years. And that's what my dad would have wanted from the person who hurt us. not grand gestures. Just consistent, honest work to be better. Do-hyun's eyes filled. Thank you, Marcus. I'll keep this with me always. Good, because you're family now, officially, which means you're stuck with us. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. That night, after Marcus and Keisha had gone to bed, Eliora and Do-hyun sat together on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. This is what happiness feels like, Eliora murmured. I almost forgot. The feeling of being full instead of empty. Of having people around who choose to be here, not out of obligation, but because they want to be. You deserve happiness, Eliora. You've always deserved it. So do you. Despite everything you did, despite the guilt you carry, you deserve to be happy too. I'm learning to believe that, slowly. They sat in comfortable silence, the apartment quiet around them, and felt the weight of what they'd built together. Not a fairy tale ending, not a redemption story that erased harm, but something more honest. A life constructed from truth and persistent effort, and the choice to believe that people could grow beyond their worst moments. In December, the community center held its second anniversary celebration. The space had expanded again. A second building purchased with ongoing donations and grants, dedicated to job training and education programs. The scholarship fund had grown to support 23 students. The legal aid office had helped 87 workers recover stolen wages and fight unsafe conditions. During the celebration, Dante gave a speech acknowledging the journey. 3 years ago, 19 families were grieving. A system that prioritized profit over people was operating unchallenged. And most of us believed that corporations were too big, too powerful, too entrenched to ever actually change. He paused, looked directly at Eliora and Do-hyun. Then, 2 people decided to do something impossible. Eliora refused to accept charity when it would have been easier to take the money and stay silent. Do-hyun refused to hide behind corporate structures when it would have been easier to let someone else take responsibility. And together, along with every family, every volunteer, every worker who demanded better, they proved that change is possible. Applause filled the room. This center exists because people chose accountability over comfort, because a widow demanded truth instead of accepting silence, because a CEO chose to lose everything rather than continue participating in a system that killed people. Dante's voice softened. That doesn't erase the deaths. It doesn't undo the harm, but it proves that the after can be different from the before, if we're willing to do the work. More applause. Miguel Santos, now 10 years old, approached the microphone with a prepared statement. My dad died when I was 5, he read carefully. I don't remember everything about him, but my mom tells me stories. She says he was brave. He tried to keep people safe even when nobody listened. And she says that this center, this place where we come for food and help and community, exists because people didn't let his death be for nothing. So thank you for remembering, for fighting, for building something good from something bad. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. After the celebration, as they were cleaning up, Maria Santos approached Eliora and Do-hyun. I have something to tell you both, she said. I've been accepted into a nursing program, full scholarship, funded by the Center's Education Initiative. I start in January. Eliora hugged her fiercely. Maria, that's incredible. It's because of what you built here, because I didn't have to choose between working 3 jobs to survive and getting an education. Because someone, she looked at Do-hyun, decided that making amends meant creating real opportunities, not just writing checks. You earned this, Maria, Do-hyun said. Your intelligence, your persistence, those are yours. Maybe, but I wouldn't have had the chance without this place. So, thank you, both of you. She paused. I still think about Roberto every day. The anger doesn't go away, but it has somewhere to go now, into making sure other families don't suffer the same way. That's something. After she left, Eliora leaned into Do-hyun, exhausted and fulfilled. We did this, she said softly. We actually did this. You did this. I just helped. We did it together. That's the point." She kissed him softly. "Thank you for not giving up. For staying even when it was hard. For becoming someone worthy of the bread I gave you that night. Thank you for sharing the bread in the first place. For seeing me as human when I'd forgotten how to be one." They finished cleaning up and walked home through December cold, their breath misting in the air, their hands linked tightly. At home, Do-hyun made tea while Eliora called Marcus to tell him about Maria's acceptance into nursing school. She could hear the pride in her son's voice, the way he'd grown into someone who believed in systems changing because he'd witnessed it firsthand. After she hung up, Do-hyun asked, "Do you ever regret it? Giving me that bread? Starting this whole chain of events?" Eliora thought carefully. "No. Because yes, it led to complications and pain and having to navigate the impossible reality of loving the person connected to my husband's death. But it also led to the center, to justice for 19 families, to proof that accountability can exist. And it led to this, to you and me, to a relationship built on honesty instead of performance, to a life that holds both grief and joy." She took his hand. "I don't regret the bread. I just wish I could have given it to you without Daniel having to die first. So do I. Every day." They sat together drinking tea, the apartment warm and safe, and made peace with the reality that some stories don't have neat endings. They just have people choosing to keep growing, keep trying, keep building something better from the wreckage of what was. Spring came slowly that year, winter reluctant to release its grip. Eliora continued working at Mrs. Park's bakery 3 mornings a week, not because she needed the money, but because she needed the ritual, the bread, the meditative quality of kneading dough in the pre-dawn quiet. Do-hyun continued at the center, his role expanding to include training programs for formerly incarcerated people trying to re-enter the workforce. They built a life together that was remarkably ordinary. They argued about whose turn it was to do dishes. They binged television shows on weekends. They took a vacation to the coast and discovered that neither of them was particularly good at relaxing, but they enjoyed trying together. They attended Marcus's engineering symposium and watched with pride as he presented research on construction safety innovations. In May, on what would have been Daniel's 45th birthday, they drove to the cemetery together. Eliora brought flowers, sunflowers, which had been Daniel's favorite. Do-hyun brought a letter he'd written but never intended to share. Words he needed to say, even if they'd never be heard. At the grave, Eliora spoke first. "Hi, love. It's been 4 years. Marcus graduated high school. You would have been so proud. He's studying engineering, trying to be the change you wanted to see. He's strong and smart and so much like you, it breaks my heart sometimes." She paused, wiped tears. "I'm happy, Daniel. I found someone. It's complicated. He's connected to your death in ways that will never be okay. But he's good to me. He's good to Marcus. And I think you'd understand. You always wanted me to live fully, not just survive. So that's what I'm doing." She stepped back, gestured for Do-hyun. He knelt by the headstone, set his letter down. "Mr. Kane, Daniel, I'm the person responsible for the system that killed you. My signature, my negligence, my choice to trust efficiency over humanity. I can't undo that. I can't bring you back. But I want you to know that your letter, the one you wrote trying to warn us, it saved something. Maybe not the lives you were trying to protect, but it exposed a system that needed to be dismantled. And because of your words, 19 families got justice. Hundreds of workers have better safety protections now. Your son is becoming an engineer who will never ignore a safety report." His voice broke. "And I love your wife. I love her strength and her refusal to accept easy answers, and the way she demands truth even when lies would be more comfortable. I'm trying to be worthy of her. I'm trying to honor the man she loved by becoming someone who actually listens when workers say something is unsafe. I'm trying to live in a way that makes your death mean something beyond just a tragedy." He stood, wiped his eyes. "Thank you for raising Marcus to be gracious. Thank you for loving Eliora so completely that she knows what real love looks like. And I'm sorry. I'll be sorry every day for the rest of my life that I didn't read your letter in time." They stood together at the grave, honoring the man whose death had changed everything, and felt his presence not as judgment, but as witness. Someone who'd fought for what was right, and whose legacy lived on in the people who continued that fight. On the drive home, Eliora said quietly, "I think he'd approve. Of you. Of us." Daniel was practical. He'd see that you've done the work, that you've chosen accountability over comfort. He'd probably give you the same speech Marcus gave you. Conditional approval with the threat of destruction if you screw it up. That seems fair. It is fair. And it's what makes this work. That you understand you're on probation forever. That you never get to stop proving yourself. I don't want to stop. Proving myself means staying accountable, staying human. In June, Do-hyun received an unexpected call. His mother in Seoul was ill. Cancer, advanced stage, prognosis uncertain. She wanted to see him. She was ready to talk after 3 years of silence. The decision was complicated. Going to Seoul meant confronting the family he'd left behind, the empire he'd dismantled, the expectations he'd destroyed. But it also meant potentially reconciling with his mother before it was too late. "Go," Eliora said when he told her. "Go see her. Make peace if you can. I'll be here when you get back." "Come with me," Do-hyun said suddenly. "Come to Seoul. Meet my mother. Show her that I didn't destroy my life. I rebuilt it. That you're not the enemy she thinks you are. Do-hyun, I'm the widow of a man your company killed. Your mother hates me. My mother thinks you're a gold digger who manipulated me. Let me prove her wrong. Let me show her what we've actually built together." He took her hands. "I need you there. I can't face that world, the world I left behind, without you." So they went to Seoul in July. The city was overwhelming after years in modest neighborhoods, gleaming towers, wealth displayed without shame, corporate culture that felt like a straitjacket Do-hyun had spent 3 years removing. His mother's house was palatial, staffed with people who barely acknowledged them. Mrs. Ri Sun-hee received them in a formal sitting room, dressed in expensive traditional clothes despite her illness. Her posture perfect, even as cancer ravaged her body. She looked at Do-hyun with an expression between love and disappointment. Then her gaze moved to Eliora, and her face hardened. "So you're the woman who destroyed my son?" "No, ma'am," Eliora replied calmly in English. She'd refused to let Do-hyun translate, wanting her words to be her own. "I'm the woman who helped him stop destroying other people." Silence. Then Mrs. Ri laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You have courage, I'll give you that." She gestured for them to sit. "My son gave up everything because of you. His company, his reputation, his family name. Do you understand the weight of that?" "I do. And I've told him repeatedly that he didn't need to do it for me. He chose to expose the truth because he couldn't live with the lie anymore. That was his choice, not mine. But you were the catalyst. You shared bread with him, and somehow that broke him. It didn't break him. It showed him he was already broken. I just held up a mirror." Mrs. Ri studied Eliora with sharp, assessing eyes. Then she turned to Do-hyun. "You love her. More than I thought I could love anyone. And you're happy? Living in poverty? Working menial jobs? No power or influence?" "I'm not living in poverty, Oma. I have enough. And yes, I'm happy. Happier than I ever was running an empire built on deaths I ignored." Mrs. Ri was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Your father would be ashamed." "I know. But I'd rather live with his disappointment than continue participating in the system that made him wealthy." "And your guilt? Has loving this woman erased it?" "No, nothing erases it. I carry it every day. But Eliora taught me that carrying guilt doesn't mean drowning in it. that I can acknowledge what I did while also building something better. Mrs. Ri turned back to Eliora. My husband built Hanseong over 40 years, 3 generations of work, and my son dismantled it in 3 months because of a widow's grief and a moment of weakness on a sidewalk. How am I supposed to forgive that? You're not, Eliora said gently. Just like I'll never fully forgive him for my husband's death. But maybe you can accept that your son chose conscience over empire. That he decided being human mattered more than being powerful. That's not weakness, Mrs. Ri. That's the hardest kind of strength. Another long silence. Then Mrs. Ri said something in Korean to Do-hyun. Do-hyun's eyes widened. Oma. I said bring her back. After I'm gone, bring her back for the memorial. Let her stand with our family. If you're going to rebuild your life with her, then she should understand where you came from. Not to excuse it, but to know it. It was the closest thing to acceptance they would get. They stayed in Seoul for 2 weeks, visiting Mrs. Ri daily, navigating the complicated terrain of a son who disappointed his mother and a mother who was trying to understand before she died. They didn't achieve full reconciliation. Some gaps were too wide, but they achieved something like mutual respect. Mrs. Ri died 6 weeks after they returned home. Do-hyun flew back to Seoul for the funeral, this time alone at Eliora's insistence. This is your family's grief. I'll be here when you get back. He stood through 3 days of elaborate ceremony, accepted condolences from relatives who whispered about his disgrace, and said goodbye to the woman who'd raised him in a world he no longer belonged to. At the funeral, Jin, still CEO of what remained of Hanseong, approached him. Your mother never forgave you, Jin said flatly. I know. Was it worth it? Destroying everything for a widow and a misplaced conscience? Do-hyun looked at his former mentor, this man who represented everything he'd walked away from, and felt no regret. Yes, every day it's worth it. He returned home to Eliora's arms, and wept for the mother he'd disappointed, and the empire he'd destroyed, and the life he'd chosen that meant he could never go back. You did the right thing, Eliora murmured against his hair. Losing her approval doesn't change that. I know. It just hurts. Most right things do. They held each other through the grief, and Do-hyun understood that this was what love meant. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of someone willing to sit with you in it. It was a Tuesday morning in October, 4 years after the sidewalk. Eliora arrived at Mrs. Park's bakery at 4:30 a.m., the pre-dawn world quiet and cold. She'd been doing this for 7 years now, longer than her marriage to Daniel, longer than she'd known Do-hyun, a constant thread through everything that had changed. Mrs. Park was pulling sourdough from the oven when Eliora entered. You're late, the older woman said without heat, by 2 minutes. 2 minutes is still late. Mrs. Park set the bread on the cooling rack, then turned to Eliora with a searching look. You're happy. It wasn't a question. I am, Eliora admitted. Good. It's about time. Mrs. Park wiped flour from her hands. That man of yours, he's coming by later? Around 6. He's volunteering at the center this morning, then helping me prep for the afternoon baking class. He's a good man. Not perfect, but good. That's rare. They worked in comfortable silence, the rhythm of kneading and shaping as familiar as breathing. Around 5:45 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. A woman entered, young, maybe mid-20s, wearing clothes that had seen too many wears. She had the specific exhaustion of someone working multiple jobs, existing in survival mode. Her eyes moved to the bread with the longing of someone who was hungry but couldn't afford to eat. Eliora recognized the look. She'd worn it herself once. Can I help you? Mrs. Park asked. The woman hesitated. Do you have day-old bread? I can pay, just not full price. Mrs. Park started to respond, but Eliora was already moving. She selected 3 loaves from the morning batch, still warm, the best they had, and wrapped them carefully. These are yours, Eliora said, handing them over. No charge. I can't. That's too much. I know it's too much. Take them anyway. Eliora pressed the package into the woman's hands. And if you need help, job training, food assistance, legal aid, there's a resource center 6 blocks east on Maple Street. They can help. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Because someone did it for me once, and it changed everything. The woman left, clutching the bread like it was treasure. Mrs. Park watched the whole exchange with knowing eyes. You know you can't save everyone. I'm not trying to save anyone. I'm just sharing what I have. At 6:09 a.m., Do-hyun arrived. He looked different from the man who'd sat on that sidewalk 4 years ago. His face less haunted, his posture less burdened, his eyes clearer. He wore jeans and a work jacket, his hands roughened by labor, his hair touched with more gray. He looked like someone who'd found peace with complexity. He kissed Eliora briefly, nodded respectfully to Mrs. Park, and moved to help load bread for the center's morning meal service. As they worked together, Eliora and Do-hyun, Mrs. Park overseeing, the rhythm felt complete. Not perfect, not unmarked by loss, but whole in the way that real things are whole. Complicated, scarred, and still functional. We're teaching the baking class this afternoon, Eliora reminded him. 12 people signed up, including Maria and Miguel. Miguel's going to be better at this than I am, Do-hyun said with a smile. He has actual talent. You have persistence. That counts. They loaded the van with bread for the center. As they worked, Marcus called, now in his 2nd year of college, thriving in his engineering program, still the bridge between past and future. Hey, Mom, quick question. You and Do-hyun have plans for Thanksgiving? Not yet. Why? Because Keisha and I are coming home and she wants to cook, so I'm giving you the week off. You and Do-hyun just show up and eat. Marcus, you don't have to. I want to. You've been taking care of everyone for years. Let us take care of you for once. A pause. Also, I'm inviting Maria and her boys, and Mrs. Park, and Dante, so it's going to be a whole thing. Eliora's eyes burned. That sounds perfect, honey. Good. Tell Do-hyun he's in charge of making his grandmother's sweet potato recipe. The one he made last time was amazing. After she hung up, Eliora relayed the message to Do-hyun. We're hosting Thanksgiving, she said. Or rather, Marcus is hosting, and we're attending. He's claiming the parent role already. Apparently. Are you okay with that? I'm honored by it. Do-hyun set down the last box of bread. Eliora, can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever regret it? Not the bread specifically, but everything that came after? The complications, the pain, the fact that our relationship will always be marked by Daniel's death? Eliora considered the question. Really considered it, giving it the weight it deserved. No, she said finally. Because yes, it's complicated. Yes, it hurts sometimes. Yes, I still have days where I can't reconcile loving you with losing Daniel. But the alternative would have been staying in survival mode forever, never demanding accountability, never building the center, never seeing you become someone who actually chooses humanity over efficiency. That would have been the real tragedy. Not that it's complicated, but that I might have been too afraid to let it be complicated. Do-hyun pulled her into an embrace, this man who'd been broken and rebuilt, who carried guilt with grace, who'd learned that accountability was ongoing work, not a destination. Thank you, he whispered, for taking the risk, for sharing the bread in the first place. Thank you for being worth the risk. They stood in the bakery's back room, surrounded by the smell of yeast and warmth, and felt the full weight of what they'd built. Not a fairy tale, not redemption theater, but something real and hard-won and marked by both loss and hope. At 7 a.m., they drove to the center together. The building was already full of people, families eating breakfast, workers starting job training classes, children in the after-school program's early morning care. Miguel Santos ran up to greet them, holding an essay he'd written about his father. "Mr. Do-hyun, Miss Eliora, I got an A. My teacher said my dad's story is important and more people should know about it." "Your teacher is right," Eliora said, reading the careful handwriting. "Your dad was brave. And so are you for telling his story." "I want to be an engineer like Marcus when I grow up," Miguel announced. "But the kind who listens when workers say something is dangerous. So nobody else's dad has to die." "That's a perfect goal," Do-hyun said, kneeling to Miguel's level. "And I'll help however I can." "Okay. Can you help me with my math homework later? My mom says you're good at numbers." "I'd be honored." Miguel ran off, and Do-hyun stood slowly, his eyes bright. 4 years ago, that child's father died because I signed papers without reading them. Now he trusts me to help with his homework. How is that possible? "Because you did the work," Eliora said simply. "Because you showed up every day and chose accountability over comfort. Because you proved that change is possible even from the most unlikely sources." She took his hand. "Because Miguel and his mother are extraordinary enough to see past the harm to the person trying to repair it. And because you never asked for easy forgiveness, you earned difficult respect instead." They moved into the center's kitchen to begin preparing for the day's meals. The rhythm was familiar now. Chopping vegetables, boiling rice, setting up serving stations. Around them, the center hummed with life that existed because people had refused to let tragedy be the final word. At 9 a.m., the breakfast service began. Eliora and Do-hyun served side by side, him ladling soup, her distributing bread, both of them greeting people by name, asking about jobs and children, and the small victories that marked survival becoming stability. Maria Santos came through the line, her nursing scrubs visible under her jacket. "First day of clinicals," she said, accepting a bowl of soup. "I'm terrified." "You're going to be amazing," Eliora assured her. "Thank you. For everything. For building this place. For showing me that Roberto's death didn't have to be the end of our story." Maria glanced at Do-hyun. "And thank you for not running when it got hard. For staying and proving that accountability can look like partnership instead of just punishment." After she left, Do-hyun said quietly, "I don't deserve their grace." "Maybe not, but you've earned the chance to exist alongside it." The morning passed in the blur of service and conversation, and small acts of care. By noon, they were exhausted and fulfilled in equal measure. They walked home through autumn streets, leaves falling in shades of gold and red, the city beautiful in the way cities are beautiful when you finally have time to see them. At home, the apartment that had been Eliora and Marcus's and Daniel's, now shared with Do-hyun, holding both past and present without erasing either. They made simple lunch and sat together in the afternoon light. "I love you," Eliora said suddenly. "I love you too. No, I love you without reservation. For the first time, I can say it without qualifiers or conditions or the weight of guilt. I just love you. The person you are now, the person you're becoming, the way you show up every day and choose humanity over everything else." Do-hyun set down his sandwich, his eyes bright. "Eliora, I'm ready," she continued. "For whatever comes next. Marriage if you want it. Growing old together. Building a life that's ours, not just a reaction to what we survived." She took his hand. "I'm ready to stop calling us complicated and start calling us family." "Are you proposing to me?" Do-hyun asked, a smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe. Is that allowed?" "It's perfect. And yes. Yes to marriage, to family, to building something that's ours." He kissed her softly. "To sharing bread for the rest of our lives." They sat together in their small apartment, these two people who'd found each other in the wreckage, and made plans for a future that honored the past while embracing possibility. Outside, the city hummed. Workers built buildings with safety protocols that hadn't existed 4 years ago. Families received support that acknowledged harm instead of burying it. A center thrived because people had refused to let corporate negligence be met with silence. And in a bakery 6 blocks away, A woman who'd received free bread that morning called the resource center number she'd been given, taking the first step toward stability. The bread continued to matter. The breaking continued to lead to rebuilding. And two people who should never have worked together proved that sometimes the hardest love, the kind marked by grief and guilt and persistent effort, was also the most real. 4 years after a sidewalk encounter that changed everything, Eliora Kane and Ri Do-hyun sat together in afternoon light, planning a wedding that would honor Daniel's memory and celebrate the imperfect, beautiful life they'd built from ashes. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was true. Some stories don't end with perfect resolution. They end with people choosing to keep growing, keep trying, keep building something better from what was broken. If you've been moved by Eliora and Do-hyun's journey, if you believe that accountability and love can coexist, that people can change if they do the work, that tragedy doesn't have to be the final word,